I'm Doug Cunningham. A suspected uranium hexafluoride leak at a Metropolis, Illinois Honeywell uranium has sparked a call by the United Steelworkers for an investigation. Honeywell has locked out the USW workers with the skill, experience, and knowledge to run the plant. Workers like local union spokesman John Paul Smith.
Experience matters. You have an inexperienced team running a nuclear facility right now. You know, people with decades of experience responding to emergencies are on the outside of the plant looking in.
Smith says the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is too cozy with the companies it regulates. When the uranium hexafluoride leaked at the plant, the gas was visible to onlookers, even as the company and the NRC told a different story.
We watch citizens call 911, and those calls basically get ignored because Honeywell, the company, and the NRC was saying that it was under control and it was in-house. People were out there watching the fire of these facilities. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission that regulates nuclear sites in our country is not funded by the federal government. It's a government agency, but it's not funded by the federal government. It's funded by the licensees, by the sites they regulate. So Honeywell pays the NRC to regulate them. And a lot of people that are on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, many people end up taking jobs in the industry.
USW Local 7669 will hold another bargaining session with Honeywell November 17th in an effort to reach an agreement and end the lockout. Verdi Union Amazon workers in Germany are striking in 5 locations. The strikes end today. The workers are struggling with Amazon over wages and working conditions. The workers want higher pay to bring them in line with collective bargaining agreements throughout the retail and mail order industry in Germany. Amazon is so far rejecting the demand. Amazon employs some 9,000 German distribution workers. United Auto Workers members at Local 2387 in Lebanon, Ohio, voted to accept a contract deal ending a long lockout. The vote ratifying the contract proposal was reportedly by just 13 votes. The workers have been locked out since June, twice before they rejected proposed deals. Concessions were part of the contract: no more company matches for 401ks and higher health insurance premiums. But a proposed wage cut was rejected. By November 3rd, the workers are all expected to be back at work. Wisconsin Jobs Now is suing Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker over the minimum wage. The group found an old state law that requires that the minimum wage in Wisconsin be no less than the living wage. It's currently $7.25 an hour. A group of workers filed a complaint under the law, but Wisconsin Jobs Now says Walker's quick rejection of the complaint, with no real investigation, is in itself a violation of the law. Walker is calling the suit a cheap political stunt. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rock on. Oh, and this town is my town. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here. So much to get to, so much to talk about. Cannot wait today. Good stuff on the horizon as we open our eyes and realize that the GOP, man, if the election isn't nailed down, they're going to steal it. I mean, you go back to 2000, you look at every election since 2000, and there have been serious questions about the sanctity of our ballot box. All the while they tell us, well, we got the answer. We'll just keep more people from it. So we're going to talk a lot about voting today, and probably for the next just less than a week from today, we're looking at voting day, November 4th, Tuesday. The first Tuesday after the first Monday of the month. It's not the first Tuesday. It's the first Tuesday after the first Monday of the month. And I'm hoping, we get, and look, I'm not advocating one side or the other. I'm hoping, I would like to see more than 40% of registered voters get out to vote. I would like to see a large number of people to the polls. I think that tells me that people are interested and active in their self-rule. Just my thought. Because the other part of me goes, well, I don't want anybody to vote, so I can say, you can't complain, shut up. So it'll be interesting to see today. We're going to talk about the voting. Also, today, happy anniversary, happy 85th anniversary of Black Tuesday. For those who, and I've been saying this to people all day, and I've gotten some looks like I've had third heads. And I guess it's how easily we forget what the causes of all of these bust cycles are. Today, obviously, the anniversary, the 85th anniversary of Black Tuesday, that basically threw the world into a Great Depression, where you saw unemployment rates reportedly upwards of 30%. You saw billions of dollars lost, lifetimes of savings wiped out. You saw, average everyday folks really getting screwed. And when I think of the Great Depression, I always think of the guy that we met on the People's Tour for America in Toledo, who said that, when you looked at the banks and the bank runs that went on, because there's a common theme that says, well, what happened, don't you know, Rick, is it's all you little people ran and got your money out, and that caused the collapse. And you go, really? Nonsense. As the professor from the University of Toledo said, look, the money that left the bank was long gone before the banks were open for people to get their money out, because the banksters and the billionaires at the time, they got their money out first. Which is generally, for those of us who pay attention to this, generally what happens. I mean, the folks at the top of the heap, they're not the ones losing everything. They may have lost something, but they didn't lose everything. They still made it till tomorrow. It's the folks in the middle and down who are the ones who lose their entire savings. They lose their homes. They lose their jobs. They lose everything. And by everything, I think back to some of the stories my great-grandmother used to tell me about the Great Depression, and some of the stories my grandfather told me. I don't know that we can really at this point in time relate, because as bad as the 2008 collapse was, it was nothing. That was a picnic, a walk in the park compared to what today, 1929, was. And the suffering and the pain and the struggle and the sacrifice that went on because of it. There weren't a social safety net like we have today. There wasn't a net like we have today. There wasn't unemployment insurance. There wasn't, food stamps. They didn't have, the programs to help you stay in your home. Eventually they did. They developed them into the 30s. But right away, no. And you saw the Pat Toomeys of the world would love to have seen in 2008, that hard down. Because evidently after today, there was nowhere to go but up. And interestingly enough, I was looking at history.com, and they pointed out by 1932, the stocks in 1932, some 3 years later, were only about 20% of the value that they were in the summer of 1929. And they pointed out by 33, you had half of the banks in the country that had failed. Unemployment was, somewhere around 15 million people, or about 30% of the workforce. And as history.com pointed out, and I don't use them often, but I thought that they kind of encapsulated the cause pretty good. They pointed out during the 20s, the U.S. stock market underwent rapid expansion, reaching its peak in August 29. a period of wild speculation. By then, they write, production had already declined and unemployment had risen, leaving stocks in great excess of their real value. Among the other causes of the eventual market collapse were, get this, low wages, the proliferation of debt, a weak agriculture, and an excess of large bank loans that could not be liquidated. And you look at today, we've got these too big to fail. You've got the Federal Reserve head in New York going, hey, too big to fail, maybe too big to exist. We might have to figure out how to do something with this. Hey, look, somebody's blaring the horn of warning. And it took me back last night. I happened to watch, someone sent me the clip of Byron Dorgan, the senator from North Dakota, who I've had on this program a number of times, who in 1999 gave a speech on the floor of the Senate saying, hey, this giant steaming turd of a piece of legislation, commonly known as Graham-Leach-Bliley, or I think it was something along the economic, the Economic Modernization Act of 99, because we're going to modernize banking because, we've learned our lesson. And in this 8-minute speech, he goes, look, you can't have boring banks and gambling together. There's a reason that you put that dividing line between the two of them. The reason you had people who were having savings accounts and home mortgages and car loans in one category and people betting on Wall Street on another category. You don't merge those ever. And, to me, after the collapse of 2008, we should have just said, Glass-Steagall, bring that back. Undo all the ugliness and the idiocy of 99 and return to sanity. Because as Dorgan went through his speech, he goes, look, in 10 or 15 years, we're going to be standing here going, there's another collapse. There's another depression. He was right, except it didn't last 10 years, did it? About 8. About the term of one really short-sighted president who didn't bother to look at all of the signs that every economist at the time were going, hey, sorry, there's something going on. You might want to look at this. And I keep going, how many times do we have to learn this lesson? And Dorgan in his speech talked about the savings and loans and, how we allowed them to become just massive leeches on society and costing hundreds of billions of dollars. What more do we need to learn? I mean, and the reason I bring this up, and we're going to talk about it more today, is because, the question is, when do we learn? My great-grandmother never put a dime in a bank. Never. She wanted everything in cash. She wanted everything in her hand. Did not trust the banks whatsoever. Why? Obviously lost her everything in the collapse. How short our memories are. Now, I'm not saying, be like my great-grandmother and keep everything in a tin can underneath the sink. But put people in charge of overseeing them that go, you know what? Banking is one thing, gambling is another. We should keep them separate. Just like in my household, we have bill money that, you need to live on, your mortgage, your utility bills, food, that's in one pot, and entertainment, gambling, whatever, over here. And the two should never meet. And if you need money for boring old bills over here, you take money from the gambling, not the other way around. And, that to me is just good old fashioned common sense that I think most people subscribe to. Why don't we have a banking industry that is regulated by people who think that way? Well, I got to be honest. I think back to something Alexis Goldstein said the other day when we were talking about the Fed chair, about the Federal Reserve guy in New York saying, hey, you might want to think about this. And she said, look, the people on Wall Street, the people in these positions, they don't care about good governance or good banking. They care about making money. Short term, tip of the nose, hooray for me, screw everybody else. And that, my friends, is where we are. So we're going to talk about that. Also, voting because as the clock is ticking down till November 4th, I hope you've got it circled on the calendar. I hope it's in big, bright, bold, red, yellow, something to remind you. If you got to put string around your finger, whatever it is, you got to get out the vote because, things like this is important. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Say the USA is drowning in graft and lies. Say the USA and resume the ties it binds. Stop taking all our money and shipping it offshore. Do the job you're looking for.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is Your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Earlier this month, 2 UN human rights experts visited Detroit to investigate the cash-strapped city's policy of disconnecting water to houses deemed to be delinquent in paying their water bills. 27,000 households have been disconnected from the grid, and while some are abandoned, many thousands are not. Leilani Farha is the UN Special Rapporteur for the right to adequate housing.
As special rapporteurs, we can receive communications from organizations, individuals, communities, etc. And that's exactly what happened. We received some pretty shocking information that was alarming to us as special rapporteurs in the area of water and sanitation and housing.
Farha said utility workers described widespread low morale and being overwhelmed by questions from residents about why they were targeted. According to UN figures, the average monthly water bill in Detroit is over $70, higher than the national average and a real burden on Detroit residents, many of whom earn less than $10,000 a year.
Everyone wanted to pay. It was, in fact, a matter of dignity, personal dignity. Mothers saying to me that they were embarrassed that they couldn't pay their bills. They want to be able to pay for their water, but they need the rates to be affordable and commensurate with their income.
All told, Farha said Detroit is failing to provide adequate housing, a right enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
It cannot be contested or debated that it is impossible to have adequate housing without running water. You need it not just for the obvious things, cooking and cleaning the house and cleaning clothes, but maintaining sanitation within the household.
To remedy the situation, Farha said Detroit should restore water connections, address the issue of affordability, and monitor precisely who is being affected, something it's not doing now as the shutoffs continue. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Salvatore Calalore. Days after several former Blackwater guards were found guilty of violent crimes, Fox News' Brian Kilmeade hosted Blackwater founder and former CEO Eric Prince on Fox & Friends. The interview glossed over the severity of the murder, manslaughter, and weapons-related convictions and provided a platform for accusations that the guards' prosecution was politicized.
So in 2007, your contractors were involved in something controversial in Iraq, and they've been convicted now. One has been 4 Blackwater guards responsible for the deaths of 14 Iraqi civilians, wounding 17 others. They have been convicted for what they say is that crime. What's your reaction to that?
The government's now 1 for 2 in this case. The first case they tried that was thrown out for prosecutorial misconduct. This has been a highly politicized case. The government spent tens of millions of dollars going after these guys.
Kilmeade went on to end the segment by actually hyping the former Blackwater CEO as a solution to success in Iraq.
And if actually we want to win the war, they should call you up.
For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
all the things you want are real. You have you to complete, and there is no deal.
Oh, yes. Not only stand, but stand and get to your local voting poll on Tuesday, November 4th, and vote. So I wish they had a song that was, instead of stand, was vote. I got to find one of those. If anyone's got one, send one to me. I would love to be able to play that. Anyway, welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. We're ticking down to November 4th. Less than a week to go till next Tuesday. And hopefully the changing of the governor's mansion and maybe a fresh start in a new direction. I mean, there's not much more how much deeper we can go down. 50th in job creation. I guess there's much like today. There's only one way up. You go back to the 85 years ago today, the beginning of the Great Depression, and as History.com said, didn't get any lower than it was today. Today was rock bottom. Anyway, let's talk to our good friend, attorney Erwin Aronson, about voting and maybe this idea of, should we be electing judges or should there be another mechanism? Erwin, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be here, Rick. And before we get into the judicial conversation and the method by which we choose jurists here in Pennsylvania, let me say one thing. It is indeed the 85th anniversary of the beginning of the 1930s Depression. And my one comment about that has always been that I never quite understood why they called it the Great Depression, because as I understand things, there was nothing great about that period of Pennsylvania and American history.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the sad thing about it is, as we found, we didn't learn the lesson, really. I mean, you go look at 2008, and we I guess another lesson we have to relearn again.
Yeah, well, exactly, and I'm mindful as a bit of a student of history that the word depression was coined as an alternative. That was a word that was used to calm people down. Until then, they had referred to these things as economic panics, and some group of psychologists or politicians or some combination of the two, I suspect, determined that that was too harsh a descriptive, or maybe too accurate a descriptive word, and they wanted something else. So that's why they coined the word depression and its companion word, recession. And I was always taken by my father's analysis of that. The difference between a depression and a recession is that a recession is when you're out of work, and a depression is when I'm out of work.
Yeah. And I've heard that before. And the thing that gets me is it should have been just called the Great Bust, because that's really, really what it was. Almost 30% of the workforce in this country unemployed at that point.
Yeah.
Sad stuff. So let's move along. Just the other day, you saw I'm sure everyone saw the reports that Seamus McCaffrey either was forced out, resigned, who knows, but he's leaving. And I remember a couple of years ago, Erwin, on this program, I had him on the program twice while he was running for election. And I remember asking, should we be even electing judges? Should this be a political kind of position that he's seeking? And I still am not comfortable with the idea of politics on the bench, even though I guess I'm smart enough to realize that they're there. I just don't know that I'm thrilled with the way that they are right now.
Well, let's talk about this at a couple of levels. Officially, former Justice McCaffrey retired from his judicial office. It will be for someone else at some other time to add editorial comment to that. I mean, the official word is that he submitted a letter of retirement to the governor, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, in response to that, withdrew its order suspending him from the bench that was issued Monday a week ago in an opinion that was written by 3 members of the court and joined by a 4th and dissented in by a 5th, with Mr. Justice McCaffrey and Mr. Justice Aiken not participating. So in an official sense, the court withdrew as being moot, in other words, no longer active or relevant, their suspension because he had announced to the governor his retirement, then effective immediately. That was the day before yesterday. So the official records should read as that. Now, the more important question. There is a notion that some people have that politics can be removed from the process of selecting jurists by taking away the people's right to vote to select them and putting it in the hands of something or someone else. And that is really and truly the question. The problem that people like me have with that analytically is that underlying the concept that I've just outlined is the idea that politics will somehow evaporate if we take the people's right to choose their judges out of their hands and put it into somebody else's hands. And that just strikes me as so much silliness, that we would be substituting the voice of the people for the voice of some group of elites who get to be on some judicial selection commission. And obviously that is going to be based, their designation, participation, selection for participation in that kind of panel, committee, commission, whatever it's called, is going to be based upon their political sponsors placing them on that group. We have so-called merit selection with respect to the federal judiciary in this country, and I know that there's a lot of politics in that. It's a presidential appointment, but in the region in which the jurist is to be appointed, designated, the U.S. senators are always involved, often congressmen. Sometimes the senators, as we do in Pennsylvania, appoint their own judicial recommendation commissions, and those tend to be populated with people who are their political supporters. And we just substitute one set of bad things for another. And this is a series of concepts that I have spent some time contemplating, not merely as an observer, but I, as you know, and many of our listeners know, was a candidate for a statewide judgeship a number of years ago now, back in 2001, for one of the vacancies that then existed on the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court, which is a statewide intermediate appellate court that hears administrative agency law matters and also has some original jurisdiction in some areas. So the real question gets to be, what is the basis, for me, the question gets to be, what is the basis upon which we strip the citizens of this Commonwealth of their right to vote and replace it with something else? And why do we believe that that is going to yield a better result somehow, or a more acceptable result to the people? It may make the Bar Association happier, and it may make some political power brokers in some back room somewhere happier. But how does it serve the people, the voters, the citizens? And that's really the question.
Yeah, to me, the other part of this is the money, though. I mean, I'm all in favor of people being able to vote, but at the end of the day, it's like, I guess, all of our politics. It comes down to, where's the money coming from? Who are you beholden to? Are you beholden to the people handing you the campaign contribution so that you can pass out the Seamus license plate like I have in my garage, or are you beholden to the people? Which I guess takes me back to my support for publicly funded elections.
Well, certainly that is a conversation and a debate that needs to be had, and public financing of elections is among the most desirable goals that we can possibly have. But absent public financing of elections, all we're doing by designating someone other than the people to choose jurists is to say to the people, you as citizens, as taxpayers, as residents, lack the requisite judgment to determine who ought to be on the bench. Substitute the word judge for the word county commissioner or city council person or school board member or township supervisor or state representative or state senator or congressman or U.S. senator or president of the United States or governor of Pennsylvania, and we would get a riot on our hands. So how do we analytically determine that judges are different? Because unless we also had public financing across the board, we're not changing the problem that you designate by stripping the people of their right to vote. We are just concentrating the power and the cash in a smaller group of hands than the people.
So you're okay with the way the system is currently?
I'm okay with the vision of the current system. I'm not okay with a whole lot of things, ranging from the non-existence of public financing to the disappointment we all have in voter participation. And as disappointment as voter participation is in presidential years and in gubernatorial years, in judicial years, it's even worse. And what we can do to get people to participate more and more frequently and more consistently in those elections at all levels, including but not limited to judicial elections, is a different question, a different conundrum. Remember, we have a society in which we still determine, as we did in 1789, that an election takes place during a 13-hour period in November, and that's it. But we have made all kinds of progress otherwise. So we have electronic voting machines and electronic tabulation. We have people who can bank by mail and who can bank on the internet and pay their bills and issue checks without writing a check and without putting a stamp on an envelope. But somehow, in the end, we still vote during this 13-hour limited period on a cold day in November, usually a cold day or an inclement day in November. And those are the kinds of things we really need to look at. I mean, why can't people vote from home? If we can bank from home, why can't we vote from home? On our computers, possibly. And I'm not advocating anything in particular, just these are the kinds of things that we need to take a look at.
Right.
What can we do to increase and be more inviting for voter participation? Understanding, of course, as we have discussed in other contexts, that certain groups of people in our society want to depress voting. They want to suppress voting. They want to avoid or evade citizen participation in the electoral process. And my personal view is, by stripping the public of its right to vote on who their judges are to be and can be, we are in effect doing away with their right to vote, not just suppressing their right to vote, but doing away with their right to vote, and then burdening them with the alternative, which is, if they don't get to vote on the judges, do they get to vote on the people who get to vote on the judges, or select or designate or announce or anoint? And that's fundamentally the problem as I see it. Remember as well, in Pennsylvania, that under the current Constitution, the 1968 Pennsylvania Constitution, unlike any other elective office, judges, once elected, serve for a 10-year term, not a 2 or a 4-year term, as other governmental offices are set up. And at the expiration of that 10-year term, that judge stands for retention on a yes-no ballot. Has the judge done his or her job appropriately well enough that he or she should be retained for another 10-year term? At that level, he or she has no opponent running against her or him. It is just an up or down yes-no ballot. So we have made some significant modifications in order to insulate jurists from some of the most burdensome and some of the most potentially offensive impacts of a raw political system on their selection. But at the same time, we've preserved the right of people to vote, and that might be among the best compromises of all.
So let me ask you that then. You know, are you okay with that system? Because there would be some who would argue they should be able to have a choice each term when it comes up, that there should be an election each term.
Well, my personal view is that the retention system helps to give us the best of a couple of worlds. When I go into a ballot box on a retention election, my view and my vote are based not on whether the jurist standing for retention has agreed with me all the time, not as a political decision, but has that jurist comported himself or herself in a fashion that's consistent with what we have a right to expect in judges? Has his or her opinion, as published in a variety of cases, been based upon honest legal reasoning, even though I may disagree with it or have had a different approach or sought a different outcome? Or is it something that is really conclusion-oriented and not based on precedent or law or constitution or legitimate reasoning? So my view on retention is different than my view on elections. I'm not looking for in retention the person with whom I always agree. I'm looking for the person upon whom I have a right to rely to apply the law fairly, period. So to me, I think it is a viable system, one that I understand and agree with. In an earlier iteration, judges used to run for initial election without party designation. Now on retention, there is no party designation on a retention ballot, but in an initial election, there is. But it used to be in Pennsylvania that both candidates for school boards and candidates for the judiciary were on the ballot without party designation at all. That has been changed. So this is a debate that comes up, and there are others who are more learned than I that would passionately argue against our current system. But I tend to think that it works, and we need to work on how we get it to be better by having greater voter participation, by moving toward public financing, and maybe a good place to start on public financing would be with the judiciary so that we get some of that money out of things. Remember that someone who runs for a statewide judicial office has all of the same burdens as someone who runs for governor or United States senator, with neither the attention nor the financing that candidates for those offices have. I mean, I gather that there's going to be upwards of $50 million having been directly spent by the two gubernatorial candidates, the two major party gubernatorial candidates, who are standing for election this coming Tuesday. And we would never see anything nearly like that for any statewide judicial office, even though judicial candidates must campaign for and secure votes from exactly the same population in exactly the same areas over exactly the same period of time.
Now, which again, to me, goes back to that money issue. As you pointed out, $50 million for a gubernatorial race. And you've got these judicial candidates doing the same stuff, having to beg for those dollars to be able to try and compete statewide.
Yeah, but they're not raising even 10% of the money that's being spent in the gubernatorial race, and that may be the issue. So public financing may be the answer.
So, in your experience in this, and has the money into the judicial races? Because I've seen some reports to say the money's gone up over the last several election cycles. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have seen that the money has gone up over the last several cycles, at least statewide. I haven't really taken a close look at the local common pleas judicial races, but I have taken a look statewide. And there have been some significant interest groups, predominantly on the right wing, that have invested heavily in relative terms in judicial races, but nothing close to the kind of money invested in Senate or congressional or gubernatorial or even state senator, state house races in relative terms. And that's an issue, and that's a problem, and something that needs to be reckoned with, but the money pales by comparison. And there is a code of judicial conduct that governs how and under what circumstances judicial candidates can solicit funds and secure funds. When I was a candidate for judge, I had no idea I mean, very specifically, I had no idea of the name of anyone that had contributed to my campaign at any level or for any amount during the entirety of the campaign. I had erected a Chinese wall between the campaign finance people and me in order to not know, much less be motivated by anything involved in the financing of my campaign. And I would suggest that the vast majority of judicial candidates of high integrity do exactly the same kind of thing.
Interesting. Last question I've got for you. Now that Judge McCaffrey has retired, what's going to happen with filling that seat, or is the court going to operate for some period with I guess, shorthanded?
Well, we don't know yet. It's in the hands of the governor and potentially in the hands of the governor-elect once the new governor is chosen next Tuesday. And there are several pieces to the question you ask. The court is down one member now with Justice McCaffrey's retirement. Come January 1st, it will be down a second member because Chief Justice Castile is required by the Constitution to give up his active judicial status, commissioned judicial status, because he reached age 70 this year, and the Constitution requires a resignation or leaving office, actually, at the conclusion of the year in which any commissioned jurist reaches age 70. And we have one interim justice on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court now, Justice Corial Stevens, who was appointed by the governor to fill the unexpired term of Justice Joan Ori Melvin after she was convicted and removed from the bench of criminal conduct in the nature of using her office and her sister's Senate office for political purposes. So we have 3 vacancies coming up next year. Governor could appoint, Senate would have to confirm for 2 of them, and that could be theoretically the current governor. The problem, of course, is that the Pennsylvania Senate only has 1 session day scheduled between now and November 30th, when they have to adjourn sine die. So it may take, if the governor chooses to do this, a special session of the Senate to consider and confirm a nominee if the governor makes one.
Well, we'll see how this turns out. Erwin, always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Good to be here, Rick. Thank you so much. And remember, Election Day is next Tuesday. All of our listeners need to vote, and each one of them should get at least 10 of their friends to vote as well.
There you go. Easy stuff. Erwin, thanks so much. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on. To the death, fight on. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Climate change and election 2014.
Mitch McConnell is fighting back, fighting hard, opposing regulations on coal.
The high stakes on energy.
Let's shut down the federal EPA.
The environment.
The Republicans are having to try to greenwash themselves in purple states.
And global warming.
If the radicals take control of the United States Senate, there will be no movement on climate change.
Climate change on the ballot. All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Not only is the ice not melting, more polar bears are alive and happy today than we've had in 100 years. Life is good, Miss Kelly. I got to tell you, life is good.
Yes, on Fox News, life is good. This is your Green News Report.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Okay, Desi Doyen, aside from the disasters on Fox News, whether it's Ebola, terrorism, or anything else, when it comes to global warming, everything is great, nothing to worry about, and that very question is going to be on the ballot across the country next week. Sort of.
Yeah, it's mostly the implications of global warming on energy and water and the environment and policies. The 2014 midterm elections are on Tuesday, November 4th. They are the first elections in U.S. history in which the media is covering global warming as a defining issue with major implications going forward into 2016 and beyond. Polls show the majority of Americans want government action on global warming, but Republicans are still holding on to denial. In the Colorado governor's race, for example, the Republican candidate, Bob Beaupre, outright denies climate change, in contrast with Colorado's current governor, Democrat John Hickenlooper.
Mr. Beaupre, do you believe humans are contributing significantly to climate change?
No.
Mr. Hickenlooper?
Significantly, yes.
Well, that's clear enough. A clear contrast.
Denial of global warming, denying the scientific data, has huge implications for policies in Colorado on water supplies, fossil fuel regulations, disaster readiness, the food supply. In Colorado alone, the state's booming oil and gas industry is already colliding with residents over control of fracking and the state's water supplies. Other Republican candidates have tried to dodge the question on climate change, like Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, locked in a close race with Democrat Allison Lundergan Grimes in Kentucky.
Senator, that's a yes or no question. Do you believe in global warming?
It is not a yes or no question. I'm not a scientist.
While McConnell's Democratic opponent, Grimes, accepts the science of climate change, both of them are beholden to Kentucky's powerful coal industry. On November 4th, control of the U.S. Senate is at stake. Republicans need a gain of only 6 seats to get control and put Mitch McConnell in charge as Senate Majority Leader. McConnell has promised to defund the Environmental Protection Agency and federal climate science research and block President Obama's new historic emission standards for power plants and cars. Republican control of the Senate would also put climate change denier James Inhofe of Oklahoma in charge of the Senate Environment Committee.
Wait a minute. This guy?
The notion that man-made gases cause global warming is probably the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people.
The guy who said climate change is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on America is going to be in charge of the U.S. Senate Environment Committee.
Oh, and it gets better. Denier Ted Cruz of Texas would be in charge of the Senate Science Subcommittee.
Of course he would.
Long-term control of the U.S. Senate will also impact whether the U.S. ratifies the upcoming United Nations International Climate Treaty, now under negotiations. Now, top environmental organizations are fighting in the election ad wars in key races, like the League of Conservation Voters, which aired this ad against Michigan Republican Senate candidate Terry Lynn Land.
We see it every day in Michigan. Climate change having real effects. So why is Terry Lynn Land still ignoring the science? She's got her reasons. Over 6 million of them from the Koch brothers front groups backing her campaign. So polluters can keep dumping carbon pollution into our air with no limits.
And of course, that's the reason that all of these Republicans are pretending they don't believe in climate change, is because they are getting millions and millions of dollars from the fossil fuel industry to pretend that that's the case.
The record $85 million that environmental groups plan to spend is no match for the $300 million spent by the billionaire Koch brothers and their shadowy front groups alone.
There's a hell of a lot at stake on the ballot next week. Don't know if the American voters know that, but I can tell you the fossil fuel industry sure as hell does, and that's why they're spending everything they need to buy this election for themselves. For much more on all of these stories and the high stakes in next week's election, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can and should find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. For bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Who's gonna take on the big machine? Who's gonna stand up and save the earth? This all starts with you and me.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm just an average man with an average life. I work from 9 to 5. Hey, hell, I pay the price. All I want is to be left alone in my average home. But why do I always feel like I'm in the twilight zone? And
Do you ever have that feeling like somebody's watching everything you do? Someone's looking over your shoulder. You ever have that feeling? You ever wonder who's listening in on your phone calls? You ever wonder if there's a whole bunch of information out there about you? You ever wonder about that? Well, you don't have to wonder. You know it's true. And I look at the study released on Tuesday by the folks at Facebook. They track their people's likes. And they have found that they can figure out what your political leanings are, your affiliations, leanings, whatever, based on what you like, based on what you plug in, what you say. Yes, I like this page, or I unfriend you. I love those commercials. They can figure out who's the Republican, who's the Democrat. They figured it out. They also have some generalizations about Democrats and Republicans. They find that Republicans, and I guess this isn't surprising. I think we all know it. Republicans tend to listen to country music, people like George Strait, Blake Shelton. They also listen to crazy right-wing rocker Ted Nugent. And I think that's more out of, he's one of our guys, so we got to support him. Also, they find that Democrats tend to go for the Lady Gagas, the Alicia Keys, Michael Jackson, like you heard, Michael Jackson, also Pink Floyd. Evidently, both parties liked Metallica. So that's interesting. Also, favorite landmarks they came across. Both parties seem to like the Jersey Shore. Many Republicans, however, they like Mount Vernon, George Washington's Mount Vernon. Also, Elvis's Graceland. Love people's stuff. Also, the Vanderbilt mansion, those things, because they idolize the individual. As where Democrats tend to bigger buildings, bigger things that we, the people, have done. The Empire State Building, for instance. And I guess, look, it comes back down to the mindset. You didn't need to, I don't know, maybe you did, but you didn't need to check everyone's likes and unfavorites. They also looked at some of the books that people read. Republicans read, Ayn Rand stuff, or this Lynn Vincent's Heaven is for Real book. Also, and while Democrats tend to go for authors like Maya Angelou and, The Great Gatsby, evidently. Both Democrats and Republicans like C.S. Lewis. On the idiot box, well, Republicans tend to be for Duck Schminesty, and Democrats preferred Comedy Central's The Daily Show and The Colbert Report. And both Democrats and Republicans like Criminal Minds and NCIS. So there you go. Kind of interesting. And you go, well, how do they get all this information? Simple. Every time you click on something, they're tracking it. Which, I guess we shouldn't be surprised. All of the store cards, all of the online surveys, all of the information that we give away for free. Hey, you want this, this 10% discount? Here, fill this survey out. And we do it. Most people are very honest about the survey and don't even think that they're giving themselves away. Which brings me to the New York Times article that someone sent me that points out that, during this election cycle, one of the most technological advanced election cycles in the history of the country. And they point out that Republicans have invested millions of dollars in infrastructure. And what they say is they showed a picture of this, this beautiful young woman and this good-looking young guy, both college students with iPhones and with smartphones and pads and going knocking door to door. It's not the door to door that you remember when that most people have done throughout their lives. When I used to do door to door knocking, you get a list of people and you get their name and address. That's it. And you never knew what was behind that door. And I've done thousands of those where you knock on the door and you don't know what you're going to encounter. And sometimes you could take your life into your own hands because some people a little touchy, but not anymore, evidently. According to the article, these Republican operatives where they have spent, like I said, multiple millions of dollars. They have these smartphones that have all of this information about you. And as the article said, even before Emma Benson, who's the nice looking young woman, even before Emma, a field director for the conservative political organization Americans for Prosperity, knocks on a door, she has more than 700 data points about the person behind it. Magazine subscriptions, car ownerships, make, model, year, all of that, propensity for voting, likes and dislikes, mined from Facebook and Twitter, favorite rock bands, baseball teams, PTO clubs, you name it, they know it. All right there in the palm of their hand. So that they can train people by knowing what you like and dislike, where to focus their conversation and where to guide you away from, in this case in North Carolina, to throw people away from Senator Kay Hagan. Now, as they point out in the article, Republicans, they have just spent tens of millions of dollars on their data collection. And, at the end of this, the question that I keep going back to is, how much did you want people to know about you? I mean, that's the thing that gets me. We give this stuff away really very nilly-willy without much thought of what exactly are we doing? Understand, information's power. And the more of it that is in the I mean, these smartphones are amazing. The amount of information that is on the web about us is amazing. Not just a couple of days ago, I spent $29.99 to do one of those internet searches of myself. To tell you if there's, do you have a criminal record? Have you, what properties you've owned, where you've lived, credit ratings, all of that stuff, all right there and fairly cheap. If you subscribe, and if you're a business that subscribes for a large order, it's pennies. So you start and think about how much information these campaigns have about each and every one of us. And these are just campaigns. Think about what corporate America has about us. And at some point, we've got to go, I'm not comfortable with this. But it's interesting to me that we're seeing this kind of data collection and this kind of power. Because I have to wonder when that starts turning, can't vote for you, can't hire you. We think you voted for that guy. To where the sanctity of the ballot box, where you close that curtain behind you, or the secrecy of the ballot box is no longer. Look, I've got no problem telling people who I vote for. And I have voted for Republicans in the past when I thought they were the right candidate. But I put that out willingly. I don't know that I want that published. I don't know that I want all of everyone's voting records published. To me, this is where this leads us. This leads us into a very weird kind of dangerous world, in my view. But I guess you look at it from the technology standpoint, it's really remarkable. Just in the last couple of elections. And the other part of it is if there's no more Joe or Jane average anybody running for something without the money, without the resources, the infrastructure, the technological savvy to be able to run these campaigns. It's no longer about just knocking on doors and, hi, I'm so-and-so. It's about having just an ocean of information. Interesting and scary on a whole number of levels that just leaves me wondering. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The smartphone app. I highly suggest getting the app. Take the program on the go wherever you go. If you got iTunes or Google Play, just look up The Rick Smith Show, and it is there and free. As always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Got to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Red roses too. I see them blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A suspected uranium hexafluoride leak at a Metropolis, Illinois Honeywell uranium conversion plant has sparked a call by the United Steelworkers for an investigation. Honeywell has locked out the USW workers with the skill, experience, and knowledge to run the plant. Workers like local union spokesman John Paul Smith.
Experience matters. You have an inexperienced team running a nuclear facility right now. You know, people with decades of experience responding to emergencies are on the outside of the plant looking in.
Smith says the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is too cozy with the companies it regulates. When the uranium hexafluoride leaked at the plant, the gas was visible to onlookers, even as the company and the NRC told a different story.
We watch citizens call 911, and those calls basically get ignored because Honeywell, the company, and the NRC was saying that it was under control and it was in-house. People were out there watching the file of these facilities. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission that regulates nuclear sites in our country is not funded by the federal government. It's a government agency, but it's not funded by the federal government. It's funded by the licensees, by the sites they regulate. So Honeywell pays the NRC to regulate them. And a lot of people that are on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, many people end up taking jobs in the industry.
USW Local 7669 will hold another bargaining session with Honeywell November 17th in an effort to reach an agreement and end the lockout. Verdi Union Amazon workers in Germany are striking in 5 locations. The strikes end today. The workers are struggling with Amazon over wages and working conditions. The workers want higher pay to bring them in line with collective bargaining agreements throughout the retail and mail order industry in Germany. Amazon is so far rejecting the demand. Amazon employs some 9,000 German distribution workers. United Auto Workers members at Local 2387 in Lebanon, Ohio, voted to accept a contract deal ending a long lockout. The vote ratifying the contract proposal was reportedly by just 13 votes. The workers have been locked out since June, twice before they rejected proposed deals. Concessions were part of the contract: no more company matches for 401ks and higher health insurance premiums. But a proposed wage cut was rejected. By November 3rd, the workers are all expected to be back at work. Wisconsin Jobs Now is suing Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker over the minimum wage. The group found an old state law that requires that the minimum wage in Wisconsin be no less than the living wage. It's currently $7.25 an hour. A group of workers filed a complaint under the law, but Wisconsin Jobs Now says Walker's quick rejection of the complaint, with no real investigation, is in itself a violation of the law. Walker is calling the suit a cheap political stunt. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
In hindsight, the new strategy was flawed, complex, poorly reviewed, poorly executed, and poorly monitored. Just because we're stupid doesn't mean everybody else was. It is very unfortunate. It plays right into all the hands of a bunch of pundits out there, but that's life. We'll have to deal with that. Just because we're stupid doesn't mean everybody else was.
Come crashing down. Oh, I want to be in that number when the banks come crashing down. When the banks come crashing down. When the banks come crashing down.
Oh, yeah. Happy 85th anniversary of the Great Depression. I always love those Jamie Dimon quotes. Just because we're stupid doesn't mean everyone else is. That's not true. You go back to 85 years ago today, most of the other people were stupid too. And this, to me, is the problem that we have with this consolidation of these huge banks. And really the other part of it is, if you went to the Facebook page and saw Byron Dorgan talking about the Graham Leach Bliley at 99, saying, look, it's coming. We've learned the lesson. Why can't we keep learning the lesson? It's just nuts. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about the great anniversary, if you will, the 85th anniversary. I've asked Dr. Eric Loomis, assistant professor of history at the University of Rhode Island, also a very popular blogger over at the Lawyers, Guns, and Money blog. Eric, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, absolutely. Glad to be here.
So happy anniversary, 85th anniversary. I guess there should be something to be said. We've made it this far, huh?
Yeah, well, we made it this far because we we decided we were going to tame the problems that caused the Great Depression, and now we've taken those all those regulations apart, and we can see where we're at. So.
Because we learned our lesson. And I remember the reason I put the Byron Dorgan speech up on the Facebook page is to tell people, look, we were told then, hey, we learned our lesson. Well, we won't do those things again. We promise. And here we are. Dorgan said 10 to 15 years. Here we are. It only took 8 years, almost right back in the same spot.
Yeah. We did learn our lesson for a long time. I mean, I think that if you look at the 1930s, 40s, 50s, into the 60s and 70s, I mean, you had a system in 1929 that where banks and corporate heads could basically do what they wanted in our economy and with very little regulation. And beginning with the New Deal, we did regulate them and really fairly effectively. I mean, we didn't create a paradise, but for a long, long time, the economy grew. Working people got a greater share of the economy, of the economic pie, and the standard of living did improve for people. And then a couple generations pass, and by the 1970s, people start forgetting those lessons. Slowly, beginning with Reagan especially, slowly start taking apart all of those things that the government did to tame this system. And we saw in 2007 that what the consequences were of taking that system apart. But by now, the ideology that government is bad and that that our corporate leaders know what's best for us is so strong that even with that horrible recession that we have not really recovered from, and certainly working people haven't recovered from, we still haven't really done anything to tame them. And so here we are again, and I'm a little scared of what's coming.
Yeah, there's talk that another one is coming. And I often said, and I have often said on this program since 2007 that had it not been for those social safety net programs that came out of the Great Depression, food stamps and housing assistance and LIHEAP and all of those programs, we would have been right back 1929 back in 2008.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that one of the lessons of 2007 and 2008, 2009 is that when government programs, the government programs that are still there, they do work. That they did save a lot of people from going under, and too many people went under as is. But without those programs, and if Social Security is privatized and all of them, Medicare is cut and all of these other things that conservatives want to do, you're going to see a situation where the next time you have a major economic decline, the situation for working people is going to be so much worse than it was in 2007, 2008. And again, I mean, we have these midterm elections coming up, and Republicans, it looks like they're going to win more seats in the House and in the Senate, and that's it's just going to make things worse for working people.
Yeah, I go back to my great-grandmother who I remember as a young kid hated banks. In fact, she kept all of her money in a can underneath the sink. Hated banks, hated Wall Street, any talk of any of that. She had nothing to do with it. And it was because she lived through that era where they lost everything. I mean, they were homeless for some time. And in fact, my great-grandfather actually worked on a couple of the WPA programs that were putting bricks down in the streets and then going and flipping them over just to get people working, to get money into the local economy, to get things going again. I think we've really forgotten that.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, going back to the 19th century and early 20th century, the corporations really tried to push an idea, these Horatio Alger stories, for instance, that ultimately, business was good for us, and these corporations, these corporate heads, they knew what was best for us, and we should play part of their system, and accept the system. And a lot of Americans did believe that. And then 1929 comes, and things don't get better, and Americans, I think, really realized, no, the system doesn't work for us, and we have to make it work for us. And the way to make it work for us is a strong union movement that demands that government intervene in the economy to ensure that working people get their piece of the pie. And I think that the decline of the union movement, really since the 60s and 70s, has coincided with, again, a very strong corporate campaign that many people buy into, that business does know what's best for us. And so, we're having problems with healthcare. Who do we talk to? Well, let's go talk to Bill Gates, right? Let's go talk to Mark Zuckerberg about schools. Well, what do these people know about schools and healthcare? Nothing. Their only qualification is that they're billionaires. But we believe this ideology that corporate leaders, because they're wealthy, they have expertise and they know what's best for us and they should be our leaders. It's very strong and it's very damaging, and I think we see the impact of that every day.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But, I keep looking at this going, how do we get that message out to that, you look at these banks that just the other day I talked about the head of the New York Federal Reserve saying that, these banks are getting so big, we might have to look at, it's something because people are going to start calling for them to be broken up. And, did we learn from 2008? It doesn't seem like we have, which is why I think talking about 1929 is so important.
Well, and I think that, another thing close related to that is the, income inequality right now and the percentage of income that the top 1% controls in our society is at its highest levels since 1929. And so we really are recreating so much of that unregulated economy that pushes all the resources, not only to the 1%, but to the 0.1% of the population where the 99% really suffers. And you see it in the size of these banks. You see it in income inequality. You see it in corporate mergers. You see it in these inversions where companies like Burger King are buying Canadian companies to escape American corporate taxes. And that just takes taxes out of the government and undermines social programs. And so we are just repeating these mistakes of the past in so many ways. And, Republicans fully support it, and even so do many Democrats. So it's very, very frustrating. And I really hope we don't have to relearn the lessons of 1929 through another horrible event. But, we certainly didn't learn very much from 2007.
Yeah, I go back to that video of Byron Dorgan talking about what's going to happen as they were talking about the Gramm-Leach-Bliley, or I think it was called the Economic Modernization Act of '99. I'm just so eerie that he was that spot on, but it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out if you allow banks to become gambling houses, eventually they blow the wad.
Yeah, and throughout American history before 1929, you see this again and again. I mean, the railroads in the 19th century, the banks in the Great Depression. I mean, you have many cases in our history where unregulated giant corporations have so much control over the economy and are corrupt and engage in shady and often illegal business practices that they tank the entire economy. The Panic of 1873, the Panic of 1893, the Great Depression. There are lessons to be learned from these events. And again in 1929, well, really in 1933, with the arrival of Franklin Roosevelt and the creation of agencies like the FDIC to make sure that, banks were monitored and that our savings in banks would be protected, we created the government agencies necessary to regulate the economy so that no corporation or no group of corporations or no industry would have so much power over us that they could tank the economy. Well, welcome to the era of Ronald Reagan, of Newt Gingrich, of George W. Bush. All of that, or not all of it, but too much of it has been taken away, has been dismantled. And what do you see again? You have a housing, these banks, speculative housing industry, these housing bubbles that are very similar to the railroad bubbles of the 19th century, the stock market bubble of 1929. And once again, you have a series of corporations operating without morals, operating illegally, committing horrible crimes against working people for profit. And there it goes, 2007, you tank the economy, and it took us a long time to learn those lessons between 1873 and 1929. And we are doing the same thing again.
I was looking at history.com and their history of the day, and they said that, and it's one of those things that They were spot on. They said, the stock market underwent rapid expansion, reaching its peak in August of 29, a period of wild speculation. They said by then production had already declined and unemployment had risen, leaving stocks at an excess of their value. Among the causes they point out are the low wages, proliferation of debt, weak agriculture, and excess of large banks having loans that they couldn't liquidate. And you just go very eerie to 2008 and even to today.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how you can have a stock market and as well as housing, and you see these apartments in New York and Philadelphia, even in places like Denver, where housing in the inner city is just skyrocketing in value, even though most people are making no more money than they made 30 and 40 years ago. That is a problem. That cannot continue. And you have just like in 1929, you have a scenario where you have people trying to create profit in all of these shady ways, creating these bubbles where you don't have a populace that's going to support that continued growth. And you saw that 100 years ago. You saw that 80 years ago, and you're seeing it today. How can the stock market continue to grow when working Americans have no ability to purchase any of these products? And I think that this is very, very worrisome.
I'm with you. One of the things that bothers me, Eric, is I've had a lot of people try and give me the rewritten version of the Great Depression, the rewritten version of what caused it, and maybe you've heard it as well. But I've had numerous people tell me, well, the reason the Great Depression happened is because all of those working people, they ran to the banks and had to run on the banks and pulled all their money out because they were scared. And to me, that's kind of been the frame that we've heard since 2007, 2008, so that you don't have another run on the banks, which I'm not saying would be good, but I don't think that was the cause.
No, absolutely not. That's not the cause at all. And people are making a run on the banks for good reason, because there was no responsibility. The banks had no responsibility for their money, right? And so that's why, that's one of the things the federal government does when the New Deal begins. One of the very first things it does is through the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, guarantee every person's money in the bank. So in that case, what's happening is you have a depression already beginning, and people are looking to get whatever they can before they lose it all, before the bank just closes and they lose everything. So that was a completely rational response, because the banks had no responsibility for their depositors' money. So, that's an absolutely incorrect view of why the depression happens. Instead, what that really was working people trying to survive. That's what that was.
And again, you go back to why that didn't happen in 2007, 2008 is people have or felt secure in the FDIC insurance, a government program that came out of that era.
Yeah, government works. I mean, that's one of the lessons. And whatever reason, we don't want to hear that lesson today. But government is the best guarantor of working people's rights. And you see this throughout American history, that only when working people have forced the government to intervene in an economy are working people's rights therefore guaranteed. And the FDIC is part of that. And it worked in 2007 and continues to work today. But, as we slowly dismantle all of those regulations, it becomes the government becomes less and less effective. And so we need to, rather than say shrink government, we need to grow government. Government needs to play a much more active role in overseeing the banks. Otherwise, more and more working people will either lose their jobs, lose their homes, not get their fair share of the economic pie.
Yeah, so what's the one thing people should take out of this anniversary? The one thing you want sticking in our heads as we walk down the streets today?
That government works. That government is that only through government regulation of these banks, strict regulation, that forces these banks to have true accountability, can we guarantee their stability, guarantee the stability of the economy going forward, and guarantee that the lives of you, listeners of this show, are going to be stable, economically stable in the years ahead. And if that means a little bit less profit for the bankers, well, good. they should be making less profit.
Now we should be putting
so
more.
I think that's the lesson.
We should be putting more into education and roads and bridges and all of the other things that that we have not been investing in adequately over the last 30 years.
That's right. The 1950s, 1960s, you had these very high tax rates on the wealthy, and you also had the massive expansion of American infrastructure, growing higher education, all of these things that make America that make America great today come out of that era. And what that meant was that what makes America great? High taxes on the wealthy.
There you go. I'm right there with you. Eric, I appreciate you taking time for us, sharing a little bit of your expertise. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. I'm always happy to be here.
Great to talk with you. Eric Loomis, assistant professor at the Rhode Island University. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is Your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Earlier this month, 2 UN human rights experts visited Detroit to investigate the cash-strapped city's policy of disconnecting water to houses deemed to be delinquent in paying their water bills. 27,000 households have been disconnected from the grid, and while some are abandoned, many thousands are not. Leilani Farha is the UN Special Rapporteur for the right to adequate housing.
As special rapporteurs, we can receive communications from organizations, individuals, communities, etc. And that's exactly what happened. We received some pretty shocking information that was alarming to us as special rapporteurs in the area of water and sanitation and housing.
Farha said utility workers described widespread low morale and being overwhelmed by questions from residents about why they were targeted. According to UN figures, the average monthly water bill in Detroit is over $70, higher than the national average and a real burden on Detroit residents, many of whom earn less than $10,000 a year.
Everyone wanted to pay. It was, in fact, a matter of dignity, personal dignity. Mothers saying to me that they were embarrassed that they couldn't pay their bills. They want to be able to pay for their water, but they need the rates to be affordable and commensurate with their income.
All told, Farha said Detroit is failing to provide adequate housing, a right enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
It cannot be contested or debated that it is impossible to have adequate housing without running water. You need it not just for the obvious things, cooking and cleaning the house and cleaning clothes, but maintaining sanitation within the household.
To remedy the situation, Farha said Detroit should restore water connections, address the issue of affordability, and monitor precisely who is being affected, something it's not doing now as the shutoffs continue. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Climate change and election 2014.
Mitch McConnell is fighting back, fighting hard, opposing regulations on coal.
The high stakes on energy.
Let's shut down the federal EPA.
The environment.
The Republicans are having to try to greenwash themselves in purple states.
And global warming.
If the radicals take control of the United States Senate, there will be no movement on climate change.
Climate change on the ballot. All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Not only is the ice not melting, more polar bears are alive and happy today than we've had in 100 years. Life is good, Miss Kelly. I got to tell you, life is good.
Yes, on Fox News, life is good. This is your Green News Report.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Okay, Desi Doyen, aside from the disasters on Fox News, whether it's Ebola, terrorism, or anything else, when it comes to global warming, everything is great, nothing to worry about, and that very question is going to be on the ballot across the country next week. Sort of.
Yeah, it's mostly the implications of global warming on energy and water and the environment and policies. The 2014 midterm elections are on Tuesday, November 4th. They are the first elections in U.S. history in which the media is covering global warming as a defining issue with major implications going forward into 2016 and beyond. Polls show the majority of Americans want government action on global warming, but Republicans are still holding on to denial. In the Colorado governor's race, for example, the Republican candidate, Bob Beaupre, outright denies climate change, in contrast with Colorado's current governor, Democrat John Hickenlooper.
Mr. Beaupre, do you believe humans are contributing significantly to climate change?
No.
Mr. Hickenlooper?
Significantly, yes.
Well, that's clear enough. A clear contrast.
Denial of global warming, denying the scientific data, has huge implications for policies in Colorado on water supplies, fossil fuel regulations, disaster readiness, the food supply. In Colorado alone, the state's booming oil and gas industry is already colliding with residents over control of fracking and the state's water supplies. Other Republican candidates have tried to dodge the question on climate change, like Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, locked in a close race with Democrat Allison Lundergan Grimes in Kentucky.
Senator, that's a yes or no question. Do you believe in global warming?
It is not a yes or no question. I'm not a scientist.
While McConnell's Democratic opponent, Grimes, accepts the science of climate change, both of them are beholden to Kentucky's powerful coal industry. On November 4th, control of the U.S. Senate is at stake. Republicans need a gain of only 6 seats to get control and put Mitch McConnell in charge as Senate Majority Leader. McConnell has promised to defund the Environmental Protection Agency and federal climate science research and block President Obama's new historic emission standards for power plants and cars. Republican control of the Senate would also put climate change denier James Inhofe of Oklahoma in charge of the Senate Environment Committee.
Wait a minute. This guy?
The notion that man-made gases cause global warming is probably the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people.
The guy who said climate change is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on America is going to be in charge of the U.S. Senate Environment Committee.
Oh, and it gets better. Denier Ted Cruz of Texas would be in charge of the Senate Science Subcommittee.
Of course he would.
Long-term control of the U.S. Senate will also impact whether the U.S. ratifies the upcoming United Nations International Climate Treaty, now under negotiations. Now, top environmental organizations are fighting in the election ad wars in key races, like the League of Conservation Voters, which aired this ad against Michigan Republican Senate candidate Terry Lynn Land.
We see it every day in Michigan. Climate change having real effects. So why is Terry Lynn Land still ignoring the science? She's got her reasons. Over 6 million of them from the Koch brothers front groups backing her campaign, so polluters can keep dumping carbon pollution into our air with no limits.
And of course, that's the reason that all of these Republicans are pretending they don't believe in climate change, is because they are getting millions and millions of dollars from the fossil fuel industry to pretend that that's the case.
The record $85 million that environmental groups plan to spend is no match for the $300 million spent by the billionaire Koch brothers and their shadowy front groups alone.
There's a hell of a lot at stake on the ballot next week. Don't know if the American voters know that, but I can tell you the fossil fuel industry sure as hell does. And that's why they're spending everything they need to buy this election for themselves. For much more on all of these stories and the high stakes in next week's election, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can and should find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. For bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Who's gonna take on the big machine? Who's gonna stand up and save the earth? This all starts with you and me.
I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
The billionaires don't want you to vote this year. We'll send you a message that's loud and clear that the votes can't be counted in your community. Why even register? Don't waste your energy. Don't go to the polls on election day, because we bought the election and it better go our way. And on election night, we'll sit back and glow. The billionaires don't want you to vote.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. The key line there, our leverage goes up as the voting populace goes down. So as in 2010, candidate Corbett said, hey, if we can hold the vote down in Philadelphia, we'll do okay. Well, they did, and he became Governor Corbett. And look at what happened the last 3.5 years here in the Commonwealth. As I understand, we're moving in the exact same direction as 2000 and 2004, 2008, right down the same paths. And, one of the guys out there bringing this to our attention, one of the few. Greg Palast is an investigative reporter now doing his work with Al Jazeera. Also, a great writer, a New York Times bestseller with a number of my favorite books. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
I'm really thrilled to be back with you, Rick.
I look at what's going on in Georgia. I look what's going on across the country, and a lot of these places where the voter suppression seems to be just right out in our face now. They're not even trying to what appears to be covering it up.
Well, actually, in Georgia, they did a pretty good job of covering it up, because I was down there on this report I've done for Al Jazeera, and I was asking the Democratic Party leader, a woman named Stacey Abrams. And I was asking, she's head of the Democratic Party, I was asking her for her comments on the removal of voters by the Republican Secretary of State. And she said, what removal of voters? And I showed her the evidence, and her head almost popped off. She would turn purple. She was really angry because she said, and this shocked me too, she didn't know about it.
Wow.
And here's what she didn't know about. If you go to, you get the information at gregpalast.com, or go straight to america.aljazeera.com, and you will see a story called Jim Crow Returns. They've got a new system, Rick. It's called Crosscheck, Interstate Crosscheck. It's to make sure that people like Rick Smith don't vote in two states in the same election.
Right.
But apparently you have, because if you, I assume that Rick is short for Richard.
Yep. I looked it up myself. I looked it up myself, and I could be taken off in a couple of states.
That's right. Well, not only taken off, but taken away. That I want to warn you, Mr. Smith, voting twice is a federal and state crime. It's a felony, and you go to jail for 2 to 10 years, Mr. Smith, double voter. Yeah. And now, how do I know that Rick is a double voter? It says so right on the Interstate Crosscheck sheets. Now, you'd say, yeah, but there's a lot of people named Richard Smith. Aha. That's their game.
Yeah. Well, here's the other part of this. Greg. Yeah. I did look at the site. Smith is 73% white. So I feel a little more confident that maybe they're not going to come after me, since only 22% of the Smiths in the country are black, because the names, and according to your report, and fantastic reporting, is they seem to spend a lot more time on blacks and Hispanics than they do on predominantly white folk.
Right. So what they do is, Smith is the most common name in America, by the way. There are 2 million people named Smith. A lot of them are named Rick Smith. But so far, no one has actually ever been busted or sent to jail named Rick Smith for voting twice. And the answer is because here's how they play the game. They're taking simply first and last names, ignoring Social Security number mismatches. It's right in their instructions. Even when they have Social Security numbers, they don't match. They're told to ignore it. They mismatch middle names. They mismatch junior, senior. Everything is mismatched except first and last name. So they say, well, that would incorporate every common name in America. Bingo! Right. That's their whole point. But the trick is, Smith is an exception to the rule. Of the 100 most common names in America, this is from the U.S. Census, of the 100 most common names in America, 85 out of 100 are overloaded with minorities. Believe it or not, most people named Rodriguez are Hispanic. Most people named Jackson are African American. Most people named Chung are Asian American. Most people named Park, Kim, or Ho, that's half of the Korean population. And I kid you not, it's half of the Korean population, those three names.
Right.
So what they've done is, and by the way, here's the trick. Everyone knows that most African Americans vote Democratic. 2/3 of Hispanics vote Democratic. What people don't know is that 73%, 3/4 of Asian Americans vote Democratic. So if you have a system that knocks out people with common names, you're going to knock out minority voters, in other words, Democratic voters. Now, I don't care about the Democratic Party where they win or lose. In Georgia, Sam Nunn's daughter, the idea that she's running because she has the same name as her creepy daddy, I don't care.
Right.
But I do care that the votes get counted, and they're knocking out people that are named Jackson and Chung and Kim. And the other trick that they use is, see, they don't just knock off your name right away. They don't just say, oh, you voted twice, because they've got 7 million people. They're not knocking off 7 million voters. They're sending out postcards to people who are supposed double voters. If you don't sign off, it doesn't say, by the way, you've been accused of double voting. It doesn't. None of these postcards say, if you don't send this back, you could lose your vote. It's a bunch of government-teased gobbledygook on a postcard. Most people throw it away. If you throw it away, you're going to lose your vote.
So isn't this the evolution of Choice Point in 2000 and caging in 2004? I mean, isn't this that evolutionary process of merging the two together?
Bingo. What's happening is they've taken an old trick. For those who know Greg Palast and my work from before, I'm the reporter who, when I was with BBC Television and The Guardian, I uncovered that Katherine Harris had removed over 58,000 people, most of them African Americans, from the voter rolls before the 2000 election. Katherine Harris removed all these people because they were supposedly felons. And in Florida, if you have a felony conviction, you can't vote. Okay. But I was the first and only reporter who said, give me the list. I found the list. I went through the list. And what I found out is that every person on the list, and I want to tell you this, it wasn't a flawed list. It was a fraud list. Every single voter on that list was a legal voter, 58,000 of them.
Wow.
Most of them African Americans, overwhelmingly Democrats. And so the list was basically a list of Democrats that didn't get to vote.
My favorite one.
58,000. Yeah.
My favorite one was the one who you found out was going to commit a felony down the road. He hadn't done it yet, but they knew he was going to do it in like 5 or 6 years. So they threw him off the voting rolls, just a preemptive measure.
Well, there was one of my favorites is Bobby Moore, who supposedly was convicted in the year 2057, and it turns out that the Florida voter named Bobby Moore, Mrs. Bobby Moore, Bobbi, was matched with Mr. Bobby Moore from another state. I think it was Ohio. So basically, this was someone who was going to commit a crime in the future, but first change their sex. And they're doing it again right now by saying voters are double voters. Now, you have to understand, anyone, and I don't care who you are, looking at this list. I'm looking at the list right now. In fact, you can go to gregpalast.com, and we'll flip you through to the Al Jazeera story, or america.aljazeera.com. You can type in your own name, but you'll see sets of these lists. Like I'm looking at James Elmer Barnes, Jr., who's supposed to be, and that's someone that voted in Georgia, that's supposed to be the same voter, James Elmer Barnes, Jr., as James Cross Barnes III. They said it's the same exact voter. Junior and the third, different middle names, 2 different states. They say it's the same voter who voted twice illegally. Well, if it's really the same voter who voted twice illegally, go arrest them. But I talked to Mr. Barnes, who said he didn't vote twice. In fact, he made the point he didn't vote at all. And in fact, he didn't vote at all. And I looked inside the program of Crosscheck at the printout, and it says he didn't vote at all. So how come he's on a list of people voting twice when he didn't vote at all? And he's doesn't have the same middle name or the same suffix. He's a junior. He's not the third. How come he's listed as a double voter? And the answer is, and here's how they're getting away with it. Until I came along, not one single United States reporter, not one, had asked for the actual list. There are a bunch of stories about how they're going after these terrible double voters on the AP Wire, in the New York Times, in the Washington Post. Let's go after these double voters. No one actually said, well, give me the list of these criminals.
Yeah, I mean,
Tonight,
just the other day, we were talking about the Phyllis Schlafly piece, who said just that. There are all these millions of people who voted twice, and I've had numerous listeners send me these different articles saying that all these people are out there. And I've just said, if they're out there and we know who they are, why haven't we locked them up? Because I haven't seen a massive perp walk of people going to jail.
If you turn on Al Jazeera tonight, and not many people do, right? Oh, that's Fox Arabia, that's terrorist TV. This is the real reporting. I want you to watch this. I can't get it on CBS. I got to put it somewhere, right? So if you go to Al Jazeera tonight at 9 p.m., or you go to their website, the Al Jazeera America, you will see that I fly down to North Carolina, where they wouldn't give me the list. They say, well, we can't give you the list of these double voters because, after all, they're suspected criminals, and we can't give you the names of people in the middle of a criminal investigation. What they didn't know is that I got the list anyway from other states who gave me the list. I had the North Carolina list. I have thousands and thousands and thousands of North Carolina voters. 190,000 voters in North Carolina are on the list of suspects. 190,000. They hired an FBI agent, a hotshot, to go arrest these double voters. He's been on the job 6 months. This is a famous FBI agent named Stuber. In 6 months, this hotshot FBI agent, who has their addresses, who has their phone numbers, has their social security numbers, has their addresses, has everything about them, the full police files on every one of these 190,000 people, he has not busted one because they're not double voters. They're two different people who never met each other with common names. They don't even have matching middle names. It's a phony top to bottom. And I talked to his PR guy. They wouldn't let me near the FBI agent, right? He's in the middle of an investigation. I said, he's been on the job 6 months. He can't find people. I said, I find them. Here, I talked to them for you. I got several of them. Let's get them on the phone. They'll talk to you. I went to people's houses. I went to meet these double voter criminals. One of them, by the way, okay, so I go to one address. I go to this guy named Fennell.
Okay.
He's listed as voting in 2 different states. I get in, knock on his door, okay, and he wheels out in his wheelchair, and he swears on a stack of Bibles he didn't vote in 2 different states. And I knew he was lying because he's like 80-something. He's clearly too weak to lift a stack of Bibles, But he's, it's so silly. And the other Fennell, by the way, spelled his name differently. That didn't matter to these guys. He's on the list. He can lose his vote. Then I went to, and of course, most of the people are in poor areas of places like in East Durham, North Carolina. And you talk to these people. The records show that they have different last names, different middle names. They show that they didn't. One guy, the guy Barnes, he says, "I didn't vote. Sorry, I should have voted, but I didn't. I didn't vote twice. I didn't vote once." And their own records show it. They ignore their own records. He's just matched by last name and first name with someone else. And why would they do that? The answer is they don't want these people's votes because most, like I say, 85 out of the 100 most common names in the United States are minority names. And so, and I went to the Asian Defense League. There was a Mr. Park there. He's about 80 years old.
Did he vote twice?
Koreans. And, well, they said he voted twice. His name was on the list. Well, of course, I kid you not, 1/3 of Koreans have that name.
Yeah, so let me ask you this.
1/3.
Let me ask you this then, Greg, because there was a story not too long ago of the Arkansas Attorney General candidate, this Leslie Rutledge, who evidently her voter registration was canceled because she was registered in Washington, Virginia, and in Arkansas,
Washington, Virginia.
and in Arkansas. So,
I looked her up. Mm-hmm.
Well, go ahead then.
I have her name. She's one of the people screaming about double voting, and she's one of the double voters. I have her on our list. She's on our list.
So did she double vote? And will she be allowed to vote come November 4th?
She's not even supposed to be running for office. She's a criminal. She should be serving time according to her system that she agrees with, that she backs. But it's baloney. The whole thing is baloney. Okay, so she's on the list. I have her name. I can see her name. If you go to Al Jazeera right now and type in the name of the Republican candidate for Attorney General, you'll find that person, her personally, is on the list. And so a Democratic county official said, try to take her off the ballot, saying you can't run. You're a criminal voter. We have to take your name off the voter roll, which means you can't even run. You can't run for office anymore. But of course, it's silly. It's a laugh, but it's no joke because really, truly, hundreds of thousands of people are losing their vote. This could bend the election next Tuesday, and absolutely will have a huge impact on the presidential election in 2016.
Now, let me ask you another line of questioning on this, because this cross-check is a private corporation, correct?
No, it's actually not a corporation at all. It's an operation run by a guy named Chris Kobach, who is the very right-wing Republican Secretary of State of Kansas. And by the way, on Tuesday, his name is on the ballot, and he's having trouble getting reelected in Kansas because the people of Kansas want to know why he's spending their taxpayer dollars to remove the names of voters in other states. He does this purge business for other states at no charge.
Wow, that's even worse than I thought.
This Republican from Kansas. So he doesn't charge any states to run their programs to match names. But the thing is, there is another system out there called ERIC, run by the Pew Trust, which does do a name matching. They say it's not to find criminals. People don't vote twice in the U.S. I talked to the Pew Trust. They said, yes, we do a matching system for states if they request it. But number one, it costs money. And number two, we check, we verify that people have the same exact driver's license, Social Security, address history, that we know that someone is double registered. Because most people, if you've ever moved from one state to another, did you send in a notice that, hey, to your Secretary of State, hey, I moved, I'm not voting in your state anymore? Just because your name is left over from your old address doesn't mean you're a felonious criminal double voter. It means that there's just an old registration sitting on the books. So this other system will help states clean up their books. It's not that important, but if you want to do it, they can do it. But they make sure that the person is the person that they say, and they send them a note, say, is it okay if we remove your name from the other state because we don't want that on the record? It's a very different thing. They don't want to do that. So there is a good system out there. They don't want it. They want the bad system. They want the system that ignores Social Security numbers. They want the system that ignores middle name mismatches. Why would they do that? Because they want to take away the voting rights of the people on that list, overwhelmingly minorities. But of course, because they can't just say, we're only removing black people, we're only removing Asian voters, they can't say that. So they got to use an algorithm which will catch a lot of white people, including all the Rick Smiths. But it'll catch a lot of white folk, but it won't catch, but it'll mostly catch minorities. By the way, Pennsylvania, there was one objection raised, and that was in the state of Pennsylvania by the ACLU. So Pennsylvania dropped out of the program, and New York is not in the program, though the supposed governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, is talking about joining it. He's talking about joining this Republican program. Maybe he should just join the Republican Party and be done with it already.
I'm with you. But, here's the thing. What happens if you go to vote on November 4th and they tell you, sorry, your name's been taken off the list? What do you do?
Well, two things. It's different in different states. In some states, if they took your name off, if you're marked as being on this double voter list and you go in and vote and swear that you are who you are, they'll give you back your vote. So say, well, that's okay, but the problem is that a lot of people are going to miss this election. If you're on that list, you don't return your postcard, you don't show up for the midterms, you've lost your vote. So that's why people really need to get out and vote. See, so they're playing, it's a very subtle game. There's 7 million names on the list, but they're not going to remove 7 million people. They're going to remove about a tenth. We know that in Virginia, they've already removed 41,000 people in just one of the 27 states.
Wow.
41,000 people. But that's about a tenth of their list. they're going to only be removing about a tenth of the list. That's going to make it very minority because poor people, black people, Hispanics, Asians, they tend to move. They are renters who move locations. So if you send a postcard to someone and they've moved to the building next door, they don't have to re-register, but they'll miss that card.
And the card, because the card can't be forwarded, right?
Right. And the problem is some states they do forward, some states they don't. And if the card is returned, for example, in North Carolina, they've just changed their rules to say that if the card is not returned, you lose your vote. In some states, they say if the card isn't returned and you miss the midterm election, you will not be allowed to vote in the presidential election. So there's sometimes, it isn't often instant, and they do this so it will be very subtle. Elections officials in Georgia were removing people without knowing that they're removing them because they're on the cross-check list. Because first they marked them as inactive. Even though they voted, if they're on the list, they're just stamped inactive non-voter. If you are stamped an inactive voter and you don't vote in the next election, the election after that, your name is missing from the voter rolls. You can't vote at all. So there's this process which takes time. And so people who do not vote in this midterm election on Tuesday are going to find themselves off the voter rolls for the presidential election. It's a reason to vote on Tuesday just to preserve your vote. People don't understand. If you don't vote, you're subject to losing your vote. And that is the new gimmick that they're doing. They combine, so it's all these combinations of vote removal techniques that all come together. So if you're on this list, you have a common name, you're on this list, you don't vote, you will lose your vote in the next election. If you're on this list and you vote in the midterms, they'll let you keep voting. It doesn't matter if you're on this list.
And
it's a very subtle way of just slowly removing the people they don't like, but it adds up into hundreds of thousands of people.
Two things. One, as you said, this is a reason to get out next Tuesday and vote. And the other part of it is you go back to that Paul Waywick clip we led into this segment with. It's about suppressing the vote. It's about giving them more leverage and holding down that vote.
Yep. And so you really, really want to vote. If you're in Scranton, PA, you better make sure that you vote because you have to make sure that they are not still using this list. You don't know. One of the problems is the states are very squirrely about it because they're saying this is a criminal activity, voting twice. So we're not going to tell you about what we're doing to investigate. We're not going to tell you what we're doing to investigate double voting. We're not going to give you the list. See, I was able to get the list because one state, Washington, said this list is junk. These people are not criminal suspects. These are just people with common names. So actually one state figured out the con, right?
Right.
And because of that, they said, since this is not a list of suspects, it's a list of common names, here, Mr. Palast, you can have it. And that was the key to busting this whole game when Washington State said, these aren't criminal suspects. They're just people named like Rick Smith, right? And that's what it is. So look, get the story. Go to gregpalast.com. We'll click you through to Al Jazeera. Watch it tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern, or go to america.aljazeera.com. Type in your name. Type in Neil Young's name. I just call in Canada. Neil Young's a friend, and he's apparently he's voted a lot of times in the United States. And type in your friends' names and see if they are double voters.
There you go. You can also go to the ricksmithshow.com, click on Greg Palast's name. It'll take you right to the site you can read the article, Jim Crow Returns, and do all of that great stuff. Greg, it's always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us, and please keep up the great work.
I shall. Okay, thanks a lot, Rick
Thanks so
Smith.
much. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. I'm the talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
the University of North Texas, known for its jazz school and sometimes for its mean green football team, might soon be known nationwide as FRAC-U. UNT, where I went to college back in the Paleocene epoch, and the good people of the surrounding city of Denton, just 30 miles north of Dallas, are at the center of an epical fight between big oil frackers and common sense citizens. Unbeknownst to nearly all Dentonites until recently, they sit atop the Barnett Shale Field, a deposit of natural gas locked thousands of feet underground in ancient rock. Suddenly, the city was invaded by Shell Oil and other profiteers drilling deep wells to frack that rock, literally shattering it with a high-pressure slurry of water, sand, and a witch's brew of toxic chemicals. Fracking rigs popped up next to schools, homes, and even on campus, generating waves of pollution, a constant roar, and the rumble of hundreds of heavy trucks through neighborhoods. People got the mess, corporations got the profit, and foreign nations are getting the energy. So, rebellion, a gutsy and savvy group of hundreds of grassroots Dentonites, led by the likes of a home care nurse, a UNT philosophy professor, and a jazz drummer, has proposed a city ban on future fracking, and they stun the arrogant, aloof fracker club by getting the proposal on the November 4th ballot. Of course, the industry powers are now rolling out their usual politicking arsenal of big money, lies, fake economic reports, and slander, accusing the grassroots people of being wacko and even terrorists. This is Jim Hightower saying, but nothing's more wacko than letting corporate giants plunder our environment, threaten our health, and frack our democratic right to govern our local communities. To follow and help the people's fight in Denton, go to www.frackfreedenton.com. frackfreedenton.com.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
I got a bad case, I'm turning it up. It's been cold in here, so fire it up. I got a bad case, I'm turning it up. It's been cold in here, so somebody fire it up.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. You know, the more you hear these schemes, the more you hear these I mean, really very creative ways of separating people from their ability to vote. And to me, it all comes back down to that. If we can just hold down the number of votes, we'll do better. Like Corbett said, if we can just hold down the vote in Philadelphia. And, you know, I went to the site that Greg points out. And again, you just go to the ricksmithshow.com and click on Greg Pallett's name. It'll take you to the site. I put in a whole bunch of my friends' names, and it's always fun to do, to look and see, you know, more over than just how many of them are criminals and voting illegally, but the percentage of, and it's something I never really thought of, the percentage of people in ethnic groups who hold your last name. Like I said, Smith, about 73.3% of the people in the country, according to the census, are named Smith, are white. 22.2% are black, 2.9% considered other, and I think 1.6 Hispanic. And you just kind of go, it's amazing that, you know, that they've calculated it down to this kind of, you know, this very, I guess it is what it is. I mean, these are really smart people who have figured out how to game the system for so long. And it really is all about gaming the system, isn't it? Because you never hear them say, hey, how can we ensure that everyone votes? How can we have maybe a national holiday? How can we have maybe a weekend of voting? How can we have maybe a whole week? Instead of having, why don't we have, you know, like a couple of nights where you can go to vote? You know, from let's say 4 to midnight. Have a couple of nights where you can go in and vote. How about that? To me, that would be more encouraging for people to participate instead of all of these schemes. And you look at Georgia, the big news that, you know, in Georgia, the 90,000 people who registered, we just don't know where they are. I mean, Greg's talking about the people who've been on it for years, they're yanking off, let alone not letting new people sign up. It's amazing to me. Absolutely amazing. Anyway, I suggest you go take a look at the article. Well worth the read. It's a lengthy bit, but it's well worth it. It's called Jim Crow Returns. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Greg Palast's name. It'll take you right there. Quick break. Right back.
And he said I was once like you, and I used to protest too. But the powers that be are too great, so walk away from your rebel faith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A suspected uranium hexafluoride leak at a Metropolis, Illinois Honeywell uranium conversion plant has sparked a call by the United Steelworkers for an investigation. Honeywell has locked out the USW workers with the skill, experience, and knowledge to run the plant. Workers like local union spokesman John Paul Smith.
Experience matters. You have an inexperienced team running a nuclear facility right now. You know, people with decades of experience responding to emergencies are on the outside of the plant looking in.
Smith says the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is too cozy with the companies it regulates. When the uranium hexafluoride leaked at the plant, the gas was visible to onlookers, even as the company and the NRC told a different story.
We watch citizens call 911, and those calls basically get ignored because Honeywell, the company, and the NRC was saying that it was under control and it was in-house. People were out there watching the file of these facilities. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission that regulates nuclear sites in our country is not funded by the federal government. It's a government agency, but it's not funded by the federal government. It's funded by the licensees, by the sites they regulate. So Honeywell pays the NRC to regulate them. And a lot of people that are on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, many people end up taking jobs in the industry.
USW Local 7669 will hold another bargaining session with Honeywell November 17th in an effort to reach an agreement and end the lockout. Verdi Union Amazon workers in Germany are striking in 5 locations. The strikes end today. The workers are struggling with Amazon over wages and working conditions. The workers want higher pay to bring them in line with collective bargaining agreements throughout the retail and mail order industry in Germany. Amazon is so far rejecting the demand. Amazon employs some 9,000 German distribution workers. United Auto Workers members at Local 2387 in Lebanon, Ohio voted to accept a contract deal ending a long lockout. The vote ratifying the contract proposal was reportedly by just 13 votes. The workers have been locked out since June, twice before they rejected proposed deals. Concessions were part of the contract: no more company matches for 401ks and higher health insurance premiums. But a proposed wage cut was rejected. By November 3rd, the workers are all expected to be back at work. Wisconsin Jobs Now is suing Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker over the minimum wage. The group found an old state law that requires that the minimum wage in Wisconsin be no less than the living wage. It's currently $7.25 an hour. A group of workers filed a complaint under the law, but Wisconsin Jobs Now says Walker's quick rejection of the complaint, with no real investigation, is in itself a violation of the law. Walker is calling the suit a cheap political stunt. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com, so that the days are ticking down. November 4th, just around the corner. As we come into the home stretch, reaching out to numerous candidates in the area saying, hey, how are things on the trail? What are you hearing? What do you see? Which is why we've asked Jake Long, the Democratic candidate in the 102nd Pennsylvania House District, to come talk to us about what's going on in his neck of the woods. Jake, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, great to be here.
So
it's been a long. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're ticking down the days. How's it looking?
Well, we're working hard. I think the polls say it's going to be very close. We can't predicate what we do on polls, but we're working hard, doing everything we possibly can. We got our commercials on the radio. We're doing door to door. We got our mailers out. We're optimistic. It's been a long, hard journey, but I can tell you this, when I go out and talk to the people, this isn't about whether it's Republican or Democrat. It's about people issues, and there's a lot of people out here. When I talk about tax fairness, and I'm talking about proper funding of education from the state, that resonates because education has been underfunded by this state, especially under this administration. And again, that has a direct impact on local property tax owners and has a direct impact on local taxpayers, period. And then when you talk about the fact that we're not repairing our roads and bridges, and the fact that, when their kids graduate from college, Rick, they're not finding jobs. Well, they're not finding jobs because employers aren't looking at Pennsylvania the way they used to. The first thing they look at is infrastructure. And you and I both know how bad our infrastructure is, and the fact that we're woefully underfunded, and that's a key issue. And there's a number of key issues that resonate with people, and I think we're gonna do well. And believe it or not, we're gonna do well with Republican voters.
Well, I can't imagine that anyone, party aside, is thrilled with 50th in job creation. I can't imagine anybody happy with that. Can't imagine anyone happy with 48th in the country in funding of higher education. I just can't imagine, regardless of party, anyone thrilled with that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. There's a certain segment of the political elite that'll tell you, well, schools get plenty of funding. They're just not using their money correctly. And then you talk to teachers and they tell me, we have to bring in a lot of our own supplies and we fund it out of our own pocket. And I talked to a parent recently, Rick, in the eastern part of the county, and he was telling me at the beginning of the school year, the teacher for his child submitted a list of things that his child's going to need for the upcoming school. He paid out over $500 out of his own pocket. So, there's a lot of half-truths and myths out there about schools there's too much money in schools. Well, that's just not true. They're being underfunded, and again, that has an impact on a lot of people.
Yeah, I got the same list actually for all of our kids, and it's not even just the things that like calculators and things that you think kids are going to need at home. It's things as simple as tissues. It's glue for the kindergarten classes,
yep,
and paper and the things that you
paper
think
and pencils. Yep.
you think are just going to be there. It's not. They're out there asking and basically begging, and if they don't get it from the parents, the teachers are the ones who, as you pointed out, are the ones going out and buying it themselves.
Yep, and other than over and above individual issues, Rick, it's the concept, and this is what I'm pushing. It's absolutely true. The priorities of this administration are skewed, absolutely skewed. I mean, they're cutting money for libraries. We didn't have enough money in the budget for teachers who are teaching special needs children. Are you kidding me? And you and I both know the sham that the budget was. I mean, it was put together with smoke and mirrors and predicated on estimates of earnings that may or may not come true. And then you get into the issue of medical cannabis. I mean, this governor is from the military, and you got 22 veterans a day that are committing suicide in this country from being recycled, 2, sometimes 3 tours, coming back with deep mental and emotional problems. And medical cannabis has been shown to be effective at combating post-traumatic stress syndrome. There's already 24 states that have voted yes on it, including the District of Columbia. And this governor is, in my estimation and the estimation of others, he thinks it's more important to protect the pharmaceuticals who have gave him some money to get elected over the welfare of not only veterans, but over the welfare of innocent children that are dying from some horrendous diseases and might have been saved. It's just horrendous.
Do you see that as an issue that a lot of people are focusing on right now? Is this something that's on folks' minds as you're out knocking on doors?
Well, I can tell you this: when you find out the veterans, yes, it is. The veterans do.
And what other issues because I know you've knocked on probably almost every door in your district. what other issues seem to be on the minds of voters as they go to the polls this November 4th?
Well, the fundamental issues, again, taxes, school funding, roads and bridges, believe it or not, with the veterans of medical cannabis. There's a whole range of issues that I've run into, but it's basically that the system's squeezing them, Rick. And there's also an underlying issue, and this comes as a result of...
I guess the phone went dead. And, look, I mean, as Jake, I think, pointed out aptly, a lot of what's going on pointed specifically at this administration and the priorities of this administration and the choices that they've made, whether it's education, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's tax policy. And, as I've talked to candidates over the last several weeks, what seems to be coming as people are becoming more interested in, hey, we got to make that decision come November 4th. What people are talking about is, look, it's priorities. And this administration has made a bunch of bad ones. And as I've been saying, in districts like Jake's that are overwhelmingly Republican, you got to look at what the Republicans have done the last 3.5 years and the priorities that they have pursued, which I would have to argue are antithetical to the average everyday working people, regardless of label. This continual siding with corporate special interest and lobbyists, to me, time to move the state forward, time for a change. Anyway, if you want to take a look at what Jake's got to offer, JakeLong2014.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Jake's name. Take you right there. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is Your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Earlier this month, 2 UN human rights experts visited Detroit to investigate the cash-strapped city's policy of disconnecting water to houses deemed to be delinquent in paying their water bills. 27,000 households have been disconnected from the grid, and while some are abandoned, many thousands are not. Leilani Farha is the UN Special Rapporteur for the right to adequate housing.
As special rapporteurs, we can receive communications from organizations, individuals, communities, etc. And that's exactly what happened. We received some pretty shocking information that was alarming to us as special rapporteurs in the area of water and sanitation and housing.
Farha said utility workers described widespread low morale and being overwhelmed by questions from residents about why they were targeted. According to UN figures, the average monthly water bill in Detroit is over $70. Higher than the national average and a real burden on Detroit residents, many of whom earn less than $10,000 a year.
Everyone wanted to pay. It was, in fact, a matter of dignity, personal dignity. Mothers saying to me that they were embarrassed that they couldn't pay their bills. They want to be able to pay for their water, but they need the rates to be affordable and commensurate with their income.
All told, Farha said Detroit is failing to provide adequate housing, a right enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
It cannot be contested or debated that it is impossible to have adequate housing without running water. You need it not just for the obvious things, cooking and cleaning the house and cleaning clothes, but maintaining sanitation within the household.
To remedy the situation, Farha said Detroit should restore water connections, address the issue of affordability, and monitor precisely who is being affected, something it's not doing now as the shutoffs continue. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the significant impact that our Declaration of Independence had on the events of its time. In early summer of 1776, the only strengths the colonies seemed to have were dreams and thoughts of freedom. In other words, there was revolution in the air. But the Second Continental Congress was meeting in Philadelphia, and there was more there than just air. On June 7th, Richard Henry Lee rose, proposing 3 resolutions: that the colonies should be declared independent states free from the British, that as a united group they should quickly form foreign alliances, and that a plan of confederation should be written and submitted to the colonies. Since some colonies were initially opposed, the votes on the resolutions were postponed to July 1st, and a committee to draft a Declaration of Independence was appointed. It included Thomas Jefferson. Join us again next time for the Declaration. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome to the new dark ages. Yeah, I hope you're living right. These are the new dark ages. And the world might end tonight.
Well, another one of those interesting stories coming out of the great state of Georgia. According to reports, the head of the Republican Party in Union County, Georgia, a guy named Joe Turnage, 76-year-old guy, thought, you know what? I think I'm going to rape and sexually assault this woman via Skype. And I guess 2 things come to my mind. Well, you know, I guess at 76, if it still works, you know, good. I guess good for him on a certain level. And 2, the technological ability to use Skype. I guess 2 things. Not fond of the rape thing, not at all. Hopefully, he will spend a good portion of the whatever's left of his existence and then beyond in the Gray Bar Hotel. But evidently, someone saw it on Skype, called the police, and I don't know who you Skype it out to. Anyway, he's been arrested. He will face charges of sexual battery and criminal attempt to commit rape. 76-year-old guy. Jeez. Evidently, though, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, his picture still has not been taken down off the Union County Republican Party website as their chair. I guess he could still be their chairman from jail. Wouldn't be antithetical to the Republican way of doing things. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Talking about Republicans doing really nasty, mean things. The woman that I've picked to be the Republicans' vice presidential candidate, because I think she's going to be. They need that woman. They need an Hispanic. This way, they can pander to 2 communities that they have abused over the years. But the governor of New Mexico, the Susana Martinez, who again I'm choosing, and I'm early on, so mark it down, thinking that's who they're going to pull to be the VP candidate. She has moved to kick. Well, I guess she's already kicked about 80,000 people off of the food stamp rolls by reinstating the work requirement that everyone says, in states that don't have jobs, it doesn't work. You can mandate people go get jobs, but if there's nowhere to work, what have you done? You've pulled money out of the community and you've caused unemployment to be worse. I mean, to me, that's just common sense. And what's interesting is I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people where they go, well, they get something special that I don't get. And I'm going, really? Do you really want to make the argument that and I just had this recently where a woman who makes a good living, has a good job, a good union job, is pointing at these immigrants, going, these immigrants, they get all this stuff. And I'm going, what stuff? They work crummy jobs in the shadows with the threat of being fired constantly. Look, I'm not in favor of, the simplistic argument that you get from the right wing is they're here illegally. I understand that. But here's the problem with that simplistic view of the world. What is, you can't change that. And saying we're going to lock them up and throw them away is not going to make the situation better. It's going to continue to force people underground, which we know by forcing people underground, you put them in abusive positions where they can be exploited and never come out and report things, which then pulls conditions down for the rest of us. So, from that point of view, you go, I want people out of the closet. I want people out of the shadows. I want people into the light so that we know what's going on and that we're not forced to live in those conditions. The same thing with the food stamp program. Look, I don't want people abusing the program any more than anyone else. But if you go to a place where it's just not there, what have you done? I think you make things worse. Here in Pennsylvania, one of the worst things this governor ever did was institute this asset test that says, we'll help you only if you're completely destitute, only if you're absolutely indigent. And they say, well, it saved the state money. Did it? It just, to me, it's shifted to other programs and it took money out of the community, which I would argue makes unemployment worse. So when I look at this, I say, just because you mandate that someone find a job doesn't mean there's one out there. Unless you're going to make government the employer of last resort, which is something I've talked about quite often. Now, a number of nonprofit groups there in New Mexico have filed a lawsuit attempting to stop this from continuing and to make sure that some 80,000 people don't get booted off of the food stamp rolls and you don't see the money dry up. Because there have been numerous studies done where you've done this, you've actually had a decrease of economic activity. And I've had these conversations a number of times. Especially bang for the buck wise, $1 that you spend on food stamps far outweighs the $1 that you spend on corporate welfare. And we know this. That $1 that we give to corporate America under the claim of, hey, we'll build something and we'll bring jobs, doesn't have the same bang as $1 that you spend on food stamps. You go, well, how can that be? Simple. That person spends every bit of that locally. And that $1 being spent locally has a reverberation effect. Because you've got to hire, people to stock the shelves. You've got to hire people to be at the cashiers, checkout line. You've got to hire truck drivers to bring the stuff there. You got to hire warehouse people to warehouse the stuff, to put on the trucks, to bring to the grocery store. Oh, by the way, you got to hire people to make it. So they make it. They put it in the cans. They put it in the truck. They drive it to the grocery store. They give it to the checkout girl. Person takes it home. Oh, by the way, someone's got to make the cans. All of this stuff, all of this activity creates jobs. It's a snowballing effect. And on this, the 85th anniversary of Black Tuesday and the beginning of the Great Depression, or the Great Bust, if you will, it's one of those things we should be going, you're right. We should be doing this stuff. I think back to my, some of the stories, my great grandmother told me about the Great Depression and some of the people that I met when my mother was working at the nursing home. And there's part of me that goes, the reason that we keep reliving these same mistakes is that, one, we have very short-term memories, but two, those people who actually lived through it and suffered through it, they're no longer with us. So we don't have those stories directly anymore. And the ones that people who do still remember those stories, remember them in a flowery light. Which I think is kind of destructive. As I said earlier, I've had a number of people throw out the rewritten version of the Great Depression, that it really wasn't the bankers who caused the collapse. It was people who were afraid. And they had the big run on the banks, which, just from the smell test, I mean, really, just from a logical point of view, just does not pass the smell test. Because I think we understand that without a social safety net, without Social Security, for instance, Social Security, the first one, without Social Security, half of the senior population at least would be below the poverty line. Whereas right now, we're about 14% of seniors are below the poverty line, which I still think is deplorable, but it's not 50%. It's not the way it was. And you start looking at, the number of children who live below the poverty line and all of this stuff. And you go, have we as a society not learned anything? And in the coming years, because we have to know it, and if you don't, I'll tell you, half of the jobs that we're doing right now will be gone in 20 years. As progress continues, half of the jobs that we're doing are going to be automated, mechanized, or just done away with. And, my daughter and I have these running conversations about, do you think that job will be around in 20 years? And, you look at truck drivers. Do you think truck drivers are going to be around in 20 years? Probably not. The Google car's got a couple million miles on it. I'm told they have a truck that has 1 million miles accident-free, driver-free with it. Amazon's talking about drones delivering packages, so we're not going to need UPS drivers or even the independent contractor, misclassified independent contractor FedEx drivers. You go to the grocery store, we're already seeing that, they're talking about an app on your phone where you just scan the product as you put it into your cart. No checkout counter, no checkout infrastructure. And then what does that mean? Nobody's making the cash registers. Nobody's making the checkout lines. None of that stuff. You're just going in with your smartphone and scanning everything. So all you need is a couple people to stock the shelves. So you stop and you think about where we're going as a nation, what the future holds. I keep talking about the need for minimum guaranteed incomes. And we need to figure out what a living wage in this country is, what you need to exist, and making sure that every citizen has at least that bare minimum. Not because we want to give things away, but because we want an economy that is going to be functional. You can't have, honestly, if you live in a consumer-based economy, you can't exist unless people have the ability to participate. And we're slowly moving towards this position where people just don't have disposable income. It's not going to be there. And, when you look at a day like today, the 85th anniversary of the beginning of the Great Depression, they learned that then really quick. Nobody had money. Wages were suppressed, were extremely low. Debt was high. Production had slowed. Stocks were well overvalued. So people thought, hey, this is the only place we can go to make money. Hey, let's gamble. Speculation drove the price of stocks skyrocket, and then bang, everything fell out. And nobody was buying anything because they didn't have any money. And if nobody's buying anything, nobody's making anything. And if nobody's making anything, no one has a job. And it's this vicious cycle. So by saying, we're going to take all of this safety net money out of the equation, because I go back to the 2008 collapse. Without the social safety net, we're at depression. We're in the middle of a depression again. It's that simple. But you look at these social safety net programs that you hear the right wing in this country, and this is why elections are so important. The right wing of this country has done everything they can do to destroy them, to put obstacles in front of them, to make them so arduous and difficult to navigate that people just throw up their hands and walk away. And I would argue to their own peril and to the peril of this nation. Something seriously wrong. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing. just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Climate change and election 2014.
Mitch McConnell is fighting back, fighting hard, opposing regulations on coal.
The high stakes on energy.
Let's shut down the federal EPA.
The environment.
The Republicans are having to try to greenwash themselves in purple states.
And global warming.
If the radicals take control of the United States Senate, there will be no movement on climate change.
Climate change on the ballot. All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Not only is the ice not melting, more polar bears are alive and happy today than we've had in 100 years. Life is good, Miss Kelly. I got to tell you, life is good.
Yes, on Fox News, life is good. This is your Green News Report.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Okay, Desi Doyen, aside from the disasters on Fox News, whether it's Ebola, terrorism, or anything else, when it comes to global warming, everything is great, nothing to worry about. And that very question is going to be on the ballot across the country next week. Sort of.
Yeah, it's mostly the implications of global warming on energy and water and the environment and policies. The 2014 midterm elections are on Tuesday, November 4th. They are the first elections in U.S. history in which the media is covering global warming as a defining issue with major implications going forward into 2016 and beyond. Polls show the majority of Americans want government action on global warming, but Republicans are still holding on to denial. In the Colorado governor's race, for example, the Republican candidate, Bob Beaupre, outright denies climate change, in contrast with Colorado's current governor, Democrat John Hickenlooper.
Mr. Beaupre, do you believe humans are contributing significantly to climate change?
No.
Mr. Hickenlooper?
Significantly, yes.
Well, that's clear enough. A clear contrast.
Denial of global warming, denying the scientific data, has huge implications for policies in Colorado on water supplies, fossil fuel regulations, disaster readiness, the food supply. In Colorado alone, the state's booming oil and gas industry is already colliding with residents over control of fracking and the state's water supplies. Other Republican candidates have tried to dodge the question on climate change, like Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, locked in a close race with Democrat Allison Lundergan Grimes in Kentucky.
Senator, that's a yes or no question. Do you believe in global warming?
It is not a yes or no question. I'm not a scientist.
While McConnell's Democratic opponent, Grimes, accepts the science of climate change, both of them are beholden to Kentucky's powerful coal industry. On November 4th, control of the U.S. Senate is at stake. Republicans need a gain of only 6 seats to get control and put Mitch McConnell in charge as Senate Majority Leader. McConnell has promised to defund the Environmental Protection Agency and federal climate science research and block President Obama's new historic emission standards for power plants and cars. Republican control of the Senate would also put climate change denier James Inhofe of Oklahoma in charge of the Senate Environment Committee.
Wait a minute. This guy?
The notion that man-made gases cause global warming is probably the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people.
The guy who said climate change is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on America is going to be in charge of the U.S. Senate Environment Committee.
Oh, and it gets better. Denier Ted Cruz of Texas would be in charge of the Senate Science Subcommittee.
Of course he would.
Long-term control of the U.S. Senate will also impact whether the U.S. ratifies the upcoming United Nations International Climate Treaty, now under negotiations. Now, top environmental organizations are fighting in the election ad wars in key races, like the League of Conservation Voters, which aired this ad against Michigan Republican Senate candidate Terry Lynn Land.
We see it every day in Michigan. Climate change having real effects. So why is Terry Lynn Land still ignoring the science? She's got her reasons. Over 6 million of them. From the Koch brothers front groups backing her campaign. So polluters can keep dumping carbon pollution into our air with no limits.
And of course, that's the reason that all of these Republicans are pretending they don't believe in climate change, is because they are getting millions and millions of dollars from the fossil fuel industry to pretend that that's the case.
The record $85 million that environmental groups plan to spend is no match for the $300 million spent by the billionaire Koch brothers and their shadowy front groups alone.
There's a hell of a lot at stake on the ballot next week. Don't know if the American voters know that, but I can tell you the fossil fuel industry sure as hell does, and that's why they're spending everything they need to buy this election for themselves. For much more on all of these stories and the high stakes in next week's election, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can and should find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. For bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Who's gonna take on the big machine? Who's gonna stand up and save the earth? This all starts with you and me.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So this is one of those things you just can't make up. One of those stories that you go, really? Honestly and truthfully, the guy who's in charge of investigating the Secret Service going after the prostitution thing with the guy who's supposed to be investigating that is actually caught for soliciting a prostitute himself. Really? Caught for being... And I guess then resigns. I guess you just can't make it up. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world in Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Bob, what's on your mind?
If you and I created that kind of a plot for a movie, somebody would say, you two are really stretching it.
Yeah.
This is Ellen Ratner emailed that today and said, I can't make this up. That's exactly what she said. Yeah, amazing.
It just blows my mind that, is it just Obama's luck? Does he live under a cloud that anything attached to where you put somebody in a position of oversight, it turns out that they do something stupid?
Well, plus, that's true. And also, it's like I'm starting to worry for the first family. This service thing, it's like, wow. Maybe they ought to, I'm against private security like Blackwater, but maybe they ought to hire somebody privately to protect the first family for a few months.
It's just insane. And I just saw this story a little bit ago that I guess we're almost going to code red, if you will, because they're tightening down security because of what went on in Canada with the shooting there.
Yes, we always do that. I mean, the Capitol after 9/11, we learned that we should always really be on an alert. Now, they kind of hype it up to actually put the word out there to try to maybe hopefully stop somebody from thinking about doing something. But technically, it's always on an alert situation because it's a target.
Yeah. Yeah, but the one thing as I was reading the story, I'm just glad that that Bush isn't president anymore because of that stupid coding system. Yeah, I just one of those things. I'm going to wake up in the morning. You're going to tell me how afraid I should be by what color we are this day. Just seemed dumb to me.
I remember walking through the airport and you would hear, "We are now on orange alert," and you would hear this. It was Tom Ridge's idea, the Homeland Security guy, who you're former governor of Pennsylvania.
Yes. Please don't remind me.
Your governor. You may not have voted for him. I know you didn't.
No, I did not. No, there were a lot of reasons I was glad to see him go, but then I saw what he did, and I'm going, I don't know, it was a good idea to see him go either.
He's a front mouthpiece, by the way, for a group called the Mojahedin Khalq, MEK, who took our hostages originally in our embassy in Tehran, and he is a mouthpiece for them. He's paid, I think, $100,000 to support them.
Wow.
I can't make that one up either.
No, look, we talked about the prostitution sting at the beginning.
There you
go. What is.
That's it.
It just where can you go? Let's talk about Ebola. Can you get Ebola from a toilet seat?
Well, they say yes, you can, and how it happens. And this is all kind of crude to think about, but Ebola patients unfortunately have horrible bouts with diarrhea and projectile regurgitation. So as a result, a lot of material is strewn in the bathroom here and there.
Yeah. Okay, we got it.
I tried to be nice, and the bottom line is, and I've got to take an air flight pretty soon, so I'm not really comfortable talking about this. But as a result, yes, you can get it that way because of the toilet seat and touching also the sides of the bathroom, etc. So it seems a little bit easier than originally we thought.
Yeah, well, you better take your Lysol wipes with you wherever you go there, Bob.
That's true.
Pretty simple stuff. So what about the Ebola thing? I mean, the big story that I saw today is one, I guess Obama's going to make, or Hagel is going to make our military quarantined for 21 days. But I guess we're going to do some voluntary thing where the woman in Maine says she's not staying home and all kind of insanity around that. What's going on?
The governor of Maine, Rick, is actually talking about using force to do something with her, because they could technically say she's a public health hazard and actually detain her legally. They could do that, and the governor of Maine may do that, but she doesn't want to voluntarily do it. She said she's in good health. She's not going to do that. And the president yesterday said, he's not for mandatory quarantine of healthcare workers coming back. But today, we will have mandatory quarantine of the military. Now, Secretary of Defense Hagel, frankly, Rick, tried to put it in, what did you say, a very, mild, or kind of a mild way, by saying, well, we can do this because these people are ordered to go there, but civilians volunteer. And so he tried to kind of put it in a more polite way. The bottom line is, they can't legally force somebody as a federal government, unless they're in the military, and then you can force them to do what you want.
Right. Well, the federal government couldn't force them, but the states can, as I understand, under the Commerce Clause, which someone had tried to explain to me, and a whole bunch of legalese, but I understand the states can, the feds can't. But, it goes back to what my grandfather always said about the military. Look, once you sign on the dotted line, you're no longer Rick Smith, you're a GI. And what's GI stand for? Government issue. Which means you're nothing more than a piece of machinery that they move around, in his view, and that's always stuck with me.
I think you'll probably see eventually some form of mandatory quarantine for those who take care of the patients in America. Because of that nurse traveling on an airplane, you might see some of that for a period of time. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this conversation in the past. I mean, you put them up in the Ritz-Carlton, put them up somewhere. Treat them decent. Don't put them in a tent out in the middle of a field somewhere.
Wasn't that horrible? Is that unbelievable or what?
I mean, that was ridiculous to me. I mean, you could have done much better than that. That's just, even if you were in favor of some type of quarantine, that's one of those things that you go, screw you, I'm not putting up with this.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, you had said it, and I agree. Give them steak, give them Merlot, whatever they want to drink, make it a nice situation, and, it's worth the amount of money versus trying to track a lady that goes to Cleveland and 133 people on an airplane, 2 schools are closed in Ohio. It's better to just pay a little bit up front and to do something.
Yeah, but the other thing that gets me about the woman from Maine, and what's surprising to me is, because it seems on the outside, and maybe you'll disagree, but it seems kind of selfish to say, "Oh, I feel fine now, and I don't care. I'm not going to abide by this quarantine." I mean, just for your own family. Look, if you don't give a rat's behind about anybody else, what about your own family, your own, your husband, your kids, your wife, your kids, whatever? What about them? That's one of those things that it just to me just points to selfishness.
Oh, I agree with you. And when it comes to some of the border stuff, in a sense of free trade and all those types of issues, we do need to have a bit of protectionism here and there when it comes to some of these issues, and protecting society in general. It's it's not like it's maybe, I think actually they say 21 days, but it can be even a little bit less. But it is just pretty brazen of her just to say, well, I feel fine. That's it. I'm not doing it.
No, it's amazing. On a lot of things I believe in, I'm a protectionist. I'm not an isolationist, which I think are two different things. You know, when I leave my house, I lock the door. I don't have a big moat surrounding my house, but I do lock the door. I want to make sure that what's in there stays, and I think that's common sense.
Right. Correct.
There you go. Let's talk about taxes. I mean, death on one side with the Ebola, taxes on the other. Should millionaires pay extra taxes? I say absolutely. In fact, I'm an advocate of going back to the good socialist days of Dwight David Eisenhower. What are the folks of Illinois thinking?
Well, Illinois is an interesting case, Rick, because not to offend California, where I have a great portion of my own family out there, but California does a lot of ballot issues, and one would say, well, California is going to do something like this. Well, this is Illinois. It's in the, quote, heartland, in the Midwest, and it has an issue where it won't have the weight of law, but it's going to really make probably a lot of pressure to make a law. It would be a constitutional change, and it wants to know if the voters are receptive to saying the 3% additional tax if you make above $1 million will be put into the state's constitution. I think it's very interesting. It's coming in Illinois, so it's sort of like a temperature taking of the Midwest. And if it catches on there, it'll catch on other states.
And I think it should. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we're seeing too many states like Pennsylvania, like my home state of Ohio, that's struggling to pay for education, struggling to rebuild its infrastructure. There are so many needs that we don't have. And you look at today, I forgot to wish you a happy 85th anniversary of Black Tuesday. You look at what's gone on since the Great Depression till now. We've done a masterful job of creating a billionaire class here the last 30 years. And to me, there's so many lessons to be learned in this period.
Right. And so I think, again, this is a very interesting concept coming up in a Midwest state. And if it passes, it could catch to other states.
And I'm hoping it will. And I also understand in Washington state that there's some talk of raising taxes on millionaires. And I understand Washington state doesn't have an income tax per se, but Bill Gates' father is actually pushing to have a tax on on couples, I think over 400,000 and individuals over 200,000.
Yes, Preston Gates, I think is his name.
Yeah. Any idea on where that's going to, what that looks like?
Well, again, I think, it might have a chance to pass, especially when you hear, wealthy people coming out saying, we ought to do this. Of course, anybody can come in. The Koch brothers can come in and, spend money. But this might be one of those, no matter how much money you spend, the people might speak in a different direction.
Yeah. Also, lastly, the AT&T FCC thing yesterday that caught my attention, that there was an interesting statement by the FCC on throttling.
Yeah, it's called throttling, and frankly, I think AT&T is going to get throttled because what they do when you have this plan where it says unlimited data, which is texting, and what they were doing is they could come in electronically, and when you text, basically use too much data, text too much, then it slows your phone down by 90%, and it was doing it to 3.5 million people at least 12 days a month. So what they're saying is there's a buffet bar here, pay $10, and by the way, the chicken will be ready in about 4.5 hours if you want to hang around. Otherwise, you just pay $10. And it's the same type of theory, unlimited data plan, but of course, when you go to get where they think you shouldn't be on your unlimited data plan, they manage to make you have a dial-up speed, and you obviously can't text quite that much anymore. So I think they're probably going to get slapped by the Federal Trade Commission, who has asked for the complaint and has filed it. Now, hopefully, they won't just pay some fine to the government, but they'll have to pay consumers, hopefully.
Yeah, but I look at what happened the last time AT&T got themselves into trouble with the Concepcion case, where they were actually charging people for things that were supposed to be free, and the Supreme Court sided with AT&T, saying, well, you signed an arbitration clause, you got to arbitrate that. Basically saying if you're going to rip somebody off, and the other part of that was no class action suit. So the answer, the response was, if you're going to rip somebody off, rip them off in small amounts over a broad number of people, so no one can hold you accountable.
They're very brazen.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. Bob, as always, great talking with you. I wish hope to look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you. You too.
I'll get it out one way or another. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
The University of North Texas, known for its jazz school and sometimes for its mean green football team, might soon be known nationwide as FRAC-U. UNT, where I went to college back in the Paleocene epoch, and the good people of the surrounding city of Denton, just 30 miles north of Dallas, are at the center of an epical fight between big oil frackers and common sense citizens. Unbeknownst to nearly all Dentonites until recently, they sit atop the Barnett Shale Field, a deposit of natural gas locked thousands of feet underground in ancient rock. Suddenly, the city was invaded by Shell Oil and other profiteers drilling deep wells to frack that rock, literally shattering it with a high-pressure slurry of water, sand, and a witch's brew of toxic chemicals. Fracking rigs popped up next to schools, homes, and even on campus, generating waves of pollution, a constant roar, and the rumble of hundreds of heavy trucks through neighborhoods. People got the mess, corporations got the profit, and foreign nations are getting the energy. So, rebellion. A gutsy and savvy group of hundreds of grassroots Dentonites, led by the likes of a home care nurse, a UNT philosophy professor, and a jazz drummer, has proposed a city ban on future fracking, and they stun the arrogant, aloof fracker club by getting the proposal on the November 4th ballot. Of course, the industry powers are now rolling out their usual politicking arsenal of big money, lies, fake economic reports, and slander, accusing the grassroots people of being wacko and even terrorists. This is Jim Hightower saying, but nothing's more wacko than letting corporate giants plunder our environment, threaten our health, and frack our democratic right to govern our local communities. To follow and help the people's fight in Denton, go to www.frackfreedenton.com. frackfreedenton.com.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13. Would you dive 14 feet deep?
I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. I picked up my shovel and I walked to the mine. I loaded 16 tons of number 9 coal, and the straw boss said, well, to bless my soul, you load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. You know, we hear a lot of people talking about, complaining about, Congress sucks. They're horrible. And I've often taken the position that I think what's going on is you've seen politicians far removed from average everyday life, that we've allowed politicians to be these high and mighty types, and that they're not really accountable. You look at, the incumbency rate, which is just mind-blowing to me, that you have this power of incumbency and this view that, they all suck except my guy, which, just doesn't make any real sense. And I've often argued that, the power of the vote is so important that you use that as the term limiter. You don't need hard line rules. I don't like anything that blocks people's ability to vote and to choose. So to me, a term limit is one of those things, one of those barriers to me picking the best person. But we don't seem to think of it like that much. And it's become so much team sport that I'm not sure where we go come the future. But I've read a number of articles of ideas on how you get more voter participation, how you get people more involved in the process. And one of those, one that I've actually advocated for, is increasing the size of Congress. Now, you've got movements across the Commonwealth of, well, we should cut the number of legislators, and because we're going to save money. You're not going to save all that much money. You'll save a little bit. It's not that much. In fact, on the federal level, I think it's like less than a penny on the dollar to have and fund the entire legislative branch. It's something really minuscule. And I've argued that we've held the number of legislators in the House by Constitution. The Senate is what it is. It's never going to get any bigger. By Constitution, every state gets 2 senators. Unless we start adding states, it's going to be 100. But the House was supposed to be, as the population grew, and so did the population of the House, because it was supposed to be where the passions of the people were to be, vetted. It's, you were supposed to be closer to the people, which is why the 2-year terms and why the smaller districts. But you look at the district sizes, and right now the average House member represents about 700,000 people. I don't know that I know some people who know who can memorize people's names. I don't know you memorize 700,000 people. Now, understand, from the beginning of the country, and I have actually had people who tell me that, the founders wanted 435. They can't tell me why. But that's how it's always been. And they go, no. The original size of the House of Representatives was about 65 people. And as the population grew, the size obviously grew. Now, the last time that the size of the House of Representatives grew was 1911. And you think about the growth from 1911 to today, you're looking at, an increase of, a couple 100% to over 300 million people. And yet you've got, 435 representatives. To me, seems kind of interesting. Now, this guy who's a professor at, I think it's Bridgewater State University, he's come up with an idea, and he's come up with a number. His number is 680 representatives, and evidently he has come up with this idea of a cube root law, which I guess is how they came up with 435. But according to him, 680 is the right number. And the way they came up with it is, much like the number 27 is 3 times 3 times 3. Evidently, 680 times 680 times 680 comes up with the population of our country. And they're kind of going, this is, his view is, this is what we should be going for going forward. As the country continues to expand, we expand the number of people in those districts and the number of representatives representing a smaller number of people. And I got to be honest, I think that's kind of a smart way to go. I kind of like it. I'm trying to get a hold of this professor to come talk with us and flesh this out a bit more, because the only side we're hearing is make it smaller, which to me just means less ability to have any contact with them and less ability for them to hear our voices individually or collectively, because we've made a system where it's just about the money, right? For me, at some point, we've got to say, hey, I would like some actual accountability and someone to actually have my thoughts and needs in mind as they pursue these laws. Because look, I'm expecting, and this is why you got to get out and vote on both sides of the aisle. Look, and as Greg Palast said earlier, if you don't vote, chances are they may throw you out the voting rolls just for not. And you're giving them an excuse. But let's say the Republicans take over the Senate. Now you've got a Republican Senate, Republican House. All of those horrible free trade agreements, they're back on the table. And if you think NAFTA was bad, I'm told the TPP is worse. And TAFTA, the Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement, will be just as bad, if not worse than that. So you've got a reason to get out and vote. Other than just the fact that, and I don't know why you need a reason other than it's just your civic responsibility. It's part of this experiment of self-rule. Just is what it is. I appreciate you being here. Look forward to talking to you again tomorrow. Again, thericksmithshow.com. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.